is. I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. Here I am. Here I am. I ain't gonna waste no whole bunch of time about the topic at hand. We already know what we're talking about up in here. This man is playing with the Pope. He playing with the Lord. He playing like, oh, that's me. Trump thinking he God all by himself. He don't need nobody else. The devil is a lie. The devil is a lie. Look at them archangels up there, though. Them fallen angels. Folk ain't talking about them fallen angels up there. Yeah, so I'm going to start with Trump. I mean, not Trump, Clinton. We going to hear what he got to say first before I go, because so I'm switching the game up. Normally, that's not my route, but that's the route I'm going to take today. I normally bring him in the middle and the end. Nope, not this time. I'm bringing him straight on in the beginning, because he playing with God. He playing with the Pope. So let's hear what he got to say. Let's go, former president. Let's hear you. Come on.
Than it's getting.
Oh.
It's April 13th. Now let me talk to you for a minute. Because something is happening in Washington right now that I think deserves more of your attention than it's getting. It's April 13th, 2026. Congress returns tomorrow from a 2-week Easter recess. And the Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, the man who is second in line to the presidency, spent his Saturday not working the phones, not brokering deals, not trying to solve any of the 5 or 6 crises sitting on his desk. No, he flew down to an airplane hangar in Bridgewater, Virginia, to headline a rally against the redistricting referendum. He stood in front of hundreds of people and called the governor of Virginia,
Oh, this ain't the one.
Abigail Spanberger.
This ain't the one. Hold on. Nope, this ain't the one. This must be something that just popped up. Hold on. Y'all see them fallen angels behind him with the military guys? Oh, no. Oh, yeah, no. Hold on. I saw it. Hold on. Nope, this is the one.
Talk to you tonight about something that happened over the last 24 hours that I believe is going to matter for a very long time. And I don't say that lightly. On Sunday night, April the 12th, 2026, which also happened to be Orthodox Easter, the President of the United States sat down and wrote a 334-word attack on Truth Social against Pope Leo XIV, the first American-born pope in the 2,000-year history of the Catholic Church. He called him weak on crime. He called him terrible for foreign policy. And then he said something that frankly stopped me in my tracks. He said, quote, "If I wasn't in the White House, Leo wouldn't be in the Vatican."
This clown. Here. Y'all please come in, hitting the like button.
Now let me tell you something. Quote, "If I wasn't in the White House, Leo wouldn't be in the Vatican." Now let me tell you something. I've been in politics a long time. I've seen presidents fight with Congress.
Joe,
I've
Crystal,
seen presidents fight
Dorothy.
with the press. I've seen them fight with foreign leaders
Noah.
and with their own parties. But I have never, not once in my lifetime, seen a sitting American president publicly claim that he personally installed the leader of the world's largest Christian denomination. That is not a political argument. That is a claim of dominion over sacred ground. And he wasn't finished. He went out on the tarmac at Joint Base Andrews and told reporters, "I'm not a fan of Pope Leo." He called him a very liberal person. He said the Pope likes crime, I guess. And then, and this is the part that really got people's attention, he said he liked the Pope's brother better because the brother is all MAGA. Now, what the Pope said back from 30,000 feet in the air aboard the papal plane on his way to Algeria, that's where this story really gets interesting. And we'll come back to that in a moment.
Okay.
But first, I want you to understand something. This is not just another news cycle. This is not just another feud. What happened this weekend is a fracture line running through the very coalition that put Donald Trump in office. And the numbers are already showing it. Now look, to understand why this explosion happened on a Sunday night, you've got to understand what's been building for weeks. The United States launched Operation Epic Fury, military strikes against Iran. And the consequences have been enormous. People are scared. Families are scared. And the Pope, doing what popes have done for centuries, spoke out for peace. Pope Leo held a prayer vigil for peace at St. Peter's Basilica on Saturday night. And his words were direct. He said, "Enough of the idolatry of self and money. Enough of the display of power. Enough of war."
Imagine being able to build an app with your name on it, just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44.
Well, we know he don't like that.
Now that's strong language from any religious leader. But from the first American Pope, speaking about an American war, those words landed differently.
How walks along?
They landed in living rooms in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan, where Catholic families were already uneasy. Let me tell you, I know what it's like to manage a crisis while the world's moral voices weigh in.
Hey, Belinda.
When we were dealing with Bosnia and Northern Ireland and the Middle East peace process, religious leaders had opinions. The Vatican had opinions. And sometimes I didn't agree with them. But here's the thing. I never treated them as enemies. I treated them as voices of conscience, because that is what they are. Presidents of both parties have understood this for generations. Eisenhower understood it. Kennedy certainly understood it. Reagan worked closely with Pope John Paul II. Even when we disagreed with the Vatican, we did so through diplomatic channels, with respect and with discretion. And then there's the reported meeting between Pentagon officials and the Vatican's ambassador to the United States. Reports say a senior Trump official invoked the Avignon papacy, a reference to the 14th century when the King of France used military power to control the papacy. Now, the Pentagon says the meeting was respectful. The Vatican called it unusual. But if that reference was made, and multiple sources say it was, that is the kind of veiled threat that should chill every American who believes in the separation of church and state.
Separation of church and state.
That's the background.
Well, I put state and church,
That's how we
same
got
thing.
to Sunday night. Now, I think it's important that we slow down and actually look at what was said. Not the headlines, not the spin, the actual words. In his Truth Social post, the president wrote that Pope Leo is weak on crime, weak on nuclear weapons, and terrible for foreign policy. He accused the Pope of meeting with Obama sympathizers like David Axelrod, a loser from the left. He wrote, Leo should be thankful because, as everyone knows, he was a shocking surprise. He wasn't on any list to be Pope.
A list
And
to
then
be
the line I
Pope.
keep coming back to.
Oh, wow.
If I wasn't in the White House,
Yeah, you was
Leo
a shocking
wouldn't be in the
surprise.
Vatican. He closed
Your
by demanding that the Pope
your loss on your second term for you was a surprise. Somebody had you thinking on their list that you was gonna win. Wrong answer. So how you gonna pop your collar? Yeah, you wasn't on the list, and even if you was, it was a fake list, and that's why you lost. Therefore, hence, that's how we got what? January 6th, insurrection. Because your ass couldn't handle your defeat. Let's go.
to be Pope. And then the line I keep coming back to. If I wasn't in the White House, Leo wouldn't be in the Vatican. He closed by demanding that the Pope stop catering to the radical left and start being, quote, a great Pope, not a politician. Then, on the tarmac at Joint Base Andrews, Trump told reporters, I don't think he's doing a very good job. He said, I'm not a fan of Pope Leo. He described the Pope as a very liberal person and said he preferred the Pope's brother Louis because Louis is MAGA. And then, roughly 40 minutes after the Truth Social tirade, the president shared an AI-generated image on the same platform depicting himself as a Jesus-like figure healing the sick on Orthodox Easter. Now, I'm not here to tell you how to feel about that, but I will say this. When you are the President of the United States, every sentence you write is a diplomatic communication.
Laying
Every image
hands
you
on the
share
sick,
is a signal
healing the
to
blind.
world.
Oh my
You
God.
are not a private citizen with a blog. You are the head of state of the most powerful nation on earth. And this is what he chose to signal on one of Christianity's holiest weekends. An attack on the Pope, followed by an image of himself as Christ. I've held that office. I know the weight of it. And I know that the words the president speaks can either heal or harm for generations.
Absolutely.
And this is where things start to get really interesting, because the Pope responded. But he did it in a way that I think reveals something fundamental.
Neuromuscular stimulation and TENS both use electrical current. They are not the same device. One manages pain. One addresses the muscular failure causing it.
Y'all please hit the like button.
About what leadership actually looks like. Aboard the papal plane on his way to Algeria, Pope Leo told reporters, I have no fear of the Trump administration or speaking out loudly of the message of the gospel. And then he said something that was,
The devil
in my
is
view,
defeated.
devastatingly effective. He said, I am not a politician. I have no intention of entering into a debate with him. And he quoted the Beatitudes. Blessed are the peacemakers.
That's amen.
Now look, you don't have to be Catholic to understand what just happened there. The president
He
threw
put the
a
Lord
punch,
on him.
a big, loud, public punch. And the Pope didn't punch back. He didn't call names. He didn't post an image of himself. He simply said, I'm not afraid of you. I
Satan.
won't play your game.
He wanted to
And
say,
here is what Scripture.
he wanted to say, I'm not afraid of you, Satan. Yeah. He should have said, I rebuke you. That's what he should have said. He should have said, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus. That's what he should have said. He's a nice pope. Yeah, let's go. Hit the like button, y'all.
Fundamental about what leadership actually looks like. Aboard the papal plane on his way to Algeria, Pope Leo told reporters, I have no fear of the Trump administration or speaking out loudly of the message of the gospel. And then he said something that was, in my view, devastatingly effective. He said, I am not a politician. I have no intention of entering into a debate with him. And he quoted the Beatitudes. Blessed are the peacemakers. Now look, you don't have to be Catholic to understand what just happened there. The president threw a punch, a big, loud, public punch. And the Pope didn't punch back. He didn't call names. He didn't post an image of himself. He simply said, I'm not afraid of you. I won't play your game. And here is what Scripture says about people who work for peace. Then he got on a plane and flew to Africa to do the work of the church. That is leadership. Not because it's soft. It's not soft at all. It takes enormous discipline to refuse to engage on someone else's terms. I know that from personal experience. There were moments in my presidency where the easiest thing in the world would have been to fire back, to match anger with anger. But the moments I'm most proud of are the ones where I found the restraint to lead instead of react. The Pope also said, too many people are suffering in the world today. Too many innocent people are being killed. And I think someone has to stand up and say there's a better way to do this. That's not liberalism. That's not conservatism. That is the foundational grammar of moral leadership, the kind America used to provide to the world. You don't have to agree with every Vatican position to understand that when a president tries to bully the spiritual leader of 1.4 billion people, and that leader responds with scripture and silence, the world knows who won that exchange. Now I want to broaden this out, because what happened this weekend isn't an isolated incident. It's part of a pattern. And the pattern is what concerns me most. We've watched attacks on the courts, attacks on the press, attacks on intelligence agencies, attacks on our allies, and now, on Easter weekend, an attack on the leader of the world's largest Christian denomination. When you line all of that up, what you see is not just a series of political disagreements. What you see is a systematic challenge to the institutions that hold a democracy together. The historian Massimo Fagioli said something I think deserves our attention. He told Reuters not even Hitler or Mussolini attacked the Pope so directly and publicly. Now, I am not comparing regimes. That is not my point. My point is that we are operating outside of any historical norm that anyone can identify. And that should concern every American, regardless of party. And think about what it means when a president claims he is personally responsible for the selection of a pope. If I wasn't in the White House, Leo wouldn't be in the Vatican. That's not just arrogance. That is a theory of power that recognizes no boundary, no institution, no sacred space beyond its reach. When the machinery of state reportedly treats a church as a geopolitical adversary, when Pentagon officials allegedly invoke medieval power grabs in meetings with Vatican ambassadors, we are in territory that the founders of this country specifically warned us about. The First Amendment exists precisely because the men who wrote our Constitution understood that government must never assert dominion over matters of conscience and faith. And that right there is the thing that should concern us the most. Not the insult, not the name calling, the worldview behind it. The idea that every institution, every court, every church, every ally, every voice of dissent is either a tool to be used or an enemy to be destroyed. That is not the American system. That is something else entirely. And we've got to be honest about that. All right, now let's talk about the math. Because I'm an old political hand, and the one thing I've learned is that eventually everything comes back to the math. And the math here is brutal. In 2024, Donald Trump won 55% of the Catholic vote. That coalition was absolutely central to his victory. Catholics are not a monolithic group, but they are a massive one. And they are concentrated in exactly the states that decide elections. Now here's where it gets real. A Fox News and Beacon Research poll from March 2026 shows that Trump's approval among Catholics has dropped to 48%. That is a 7-point swing. 60% of Catholics disapprove of how he's handling the conflict with Iran, which is the exact issue the Pope has been condemning. Meanwhile, Pope Leo XIV holds the highest favorability rating of any public figure in the country. An NBC poll in March found him at plus 34 net favorable. That is an extraordinary number in this polarized environment. Now let me tell you where those Catholic voters live. Pennsylvania, 21.8% Catholic. Wisconsin, 21%. Michigan, nearly 15%. New Jersey, almost 32%. New York, over 30%. These are not safe Republican states. These are the exact battlegrounds where the 2026 midterms will be decided. I can name you the districts. Brian Fitzpatrick in Pennsylvania's 1st. Ryan McKenzie in Pennsylvania's 7th. Derek Van Orden in Wisconsin's 3rd. Michael Lawler in New York's 17th. Tom Kaine in New Jersey's 7th. In races decided by 2 to 4 points, a 7-point Catholic swing isn't a footnote, it's an earthquake. Here's the honest truth. You can survive losing a news cycle. You can survive losing a debate, but you cannot survive losing the people who got you elected. And this week, the president told those people that their pope likes crime and should be grateful to him. That's not strategy. That is a political suicide note for the midterms. So where does this go from here? Let me walk you through the way I see it, because there are several paths and each one leads somewhere very different. The first scenario, and frankly the most likely one, given the AI Jesus image and the tarmac comments, is that the president doubles down. He keeps attacking the Pope. The Vatican maintains its moral high ground. Catholic bishops in the United States, even those who have been sympathetic to the Republican agenda on issues like abortion, begin to unify behind the Pope. That erosion among Catholic voters accelerates through the summer. And Republican House candidates in Catholic-heavy swing districts face an impossible choice: stand with the president and alienate Catholic suburbanites, or distance from the president and face MAGA primary challengers. That's a lose-lose, and I've seen that kind of trap destroy parties. The second scenario, the ceasefire in Iran holds. J.D. Vance, who is himself Catholic, successfully brokers a diplomatic resolution. Tensions de-escalate. The president claims vindication. But even in that scenario, the damage to the Catholic relationship may already be structural. You can unsay a lot of things in politics, but telling 1 billion people their spiritual father likes crime, that doesn't wash out easily.
Interested in GLP-1s for weight loss, but worried about high costs and hidden markups? GoodRx now offers monthly.
The third scenario, the conflict escalates. The Pope becomes an even louder voice of moral opposition. And this becomes the defining fault line of the 2026 elections. A moral authority standing against a war president. We've seen this before in American history. With Dr. King in Vietnam, the political ground shifted permanently. Let me tell you something I learned in the White House. Coalitions are not built on loyalty to one person. They're built on shared values. And the moment a leader tells his coalition that their values don't matter, that their pope is the enemy, that coalition starts to crack. And cracks in politics don't heal, they widen. I want to close with something personal. I know this country is divided. I know the war in Iran has shaken people's confidence. The economy is uncertain. Trust in our institutions is at historic lows. And I understand why people are frustrated, why they're angry, why they feel like the system isn't working for them. I've always understood that. But here's what I keep coming back to. The Pope's response, calm, principled, grounded in faith rather than politics, offers something we desperately need right now. Not just for Catholics, for all of us. It's a reminder that there is a way to stand firm without tearing things down. That you can disagree with power without becoming consumed by it. That leadership is not about who can shout the loudest, it's about who can hold steady when the pressure is greatest. The American experiment was built on a very simple idea, that power must always be checked, that no one is above accountability, that the dignity of the office depends on the character of the person who holds it. Every generation has had to defend that idea, and this is our turn. I'm not here to call for anyone's defeat.
Hey,
I'm
Larry.
calling for something bigger than that. I'm calling for America's renewal. A return to the understanding that
Trump
we have
playing with God.
responsibilities to each other,
Because he's
across
scared of the
party
Epstein
lines,
files.
across faith traditions, across all the divisions of accountability, that the dignity of the office depends on the character of the person who holds it. Every generation has had to defend that idea, and this is our turn. I'm not here to call for anyone's defeat. I'm calling for something bigger than that. I'm calling for America's renewal. a return to the understanding that we have responsibilities to each other across party lines, across faith traditions, across all the divisions that people try to exploit for short-term political gain. You know, when I was president, I got a lot of things right, and I got some things wrong. But I never forgot that the office was bigger than me. The country was bigger than me. And the values that built this nation, decency, humility, respect for one another's conscience, those are bigger than any one of us. That's the America I still believe in. And I truly believe, most Americans still believe in it too. Thank you.
Why is everyone using ninja transfers?
Ninja transfers is definitely killing them. The qual.
Let's see where we go next. Hold on. That was 7 hours ago. Trump.
Donald Trump's attacks on the Pope today included the nonsensical statement, quote, I think he's very weak on crime.
And
There
he
has never
says the
been
biggest
a
criminal.
Pope in favor of crime. And Donald Trump is the first politician in American history who thinks the Pope is some kind of political candidate that he is campaigning against. Donald Trump also told the demented lie in attacking the Pope that Iran wants to, quote, exterminate the world. Now, think of the level of depraved stupidity involved in that statement. Iran wants nuclear weapons, quote, so they can exterminate the world, end quote. That is Donald Trump's childlike understanding of nuclear weapons that has apparently not become even slightly more informed as a result of becoming president and being in control of nuclear weapons himself. After another brush with Donald Trump's madness today, Pope Leo said this.
I have no fear of neither the Trump administration nor speaking out loudly about the person of the gospel. And that's what I believe. I am called to do what the church is called to do. We're not politicians. We're not looking to make foreign policies and calls it with the same perspective that he might understand it. But I do believe in the message of the gospel. Blessed are the peacemakers, is the message of the world needs to hear.
And not one of those Republican Catholics in the House or the Senate
Said
have the
nothing.
courage to say today, I agree with the Pope. Not one of them. Donald Trump's longest-serving White House Chief of Staff, former Marine Corps General John Kelly, according to a report in the New York Times today, concluded that Donald Trump was mentally ill. John Kelly reached that conclusion possibly after learning about a book on this program that we featured repeatedly on this program, co-authored by mental health professionals, called The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump. The
That's
Times
a
reports
book?
today, quote, John F. Kelly, his longest-serving White House Chief of Staff in the first term, even bought a book by 27 of those specialists called The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump in an effort to understand his boss, and came to the conclusion that he was mentally ill. And that is not a 6-inch headline in newspapers around the country, around the world tonight. Donald Trump was mentally ill, says Chief of Staff. Imagine if an Obama White House Chief of Staff, a Biden White House Chief of Staff, a Bush White House Chief of Staff, any White House Chief of Staff had ever said that the president and the White House they served in was mentally ill. If that was said at any point in time, during or after a presidency, it would be huge news. But now, it's buried inside a longer New York Times article under the headline.
That's why
Trump's
Israel
erratically
and them
angry
lobbied
extreme comments
by
revived
way of him, because they
mental
knew that he
health
was sick in the
debate.
head.
The article shows a photograph. Donald Trump's longest-serving White House Chief of Staff, former Marine Corps General John Kelly, according to a report in the New York Times today, concluded that Donald Trump was mentally ill. John Kelly reached that conclusion possibly after learning about a book on this program that we featured repeatedly on this program, co-authored by mental health professionals, called The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump. The Times reports today, quote, John F. Kelly, his longest-serving White House Chief of Staff in the first term, even bought a book by 27 of those specialists called The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump in an effort to understand his boss, and came to the conclusion that he was mentally ill. And that is not a 6-inch headline in newspapers around the country, around the world tonight. Donald Trump was mentally ill, says Chief of Staff. Imagine if an Obama White House Chief of Staff, a Biden White House Chief of Staff, a Bush White House Chief of Staff, any White House Chief of Staff had ever said that the president and the White House they served in was mentally ill. If that was said at any point in time, during or after a presidency, it would be huge
You would have
news.
to be mental to leave
But
your
now,
border open
it's
in
buried
Israel.
inside a
About to
longer
be
New York Times article
on
under the
their
headline,
own.
Trump's erratic behavior and extreme comments revive mental health debate. The article shows a photograph of
Queen
Donald Trump with a
Sheba,
couple
I
of
don't
his
know what you
favorite
mean.
people,
I don't know
Tucker
what you're
Carlson,
trying to say.
and then Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. In 2022, just having the time of their lives. And now Donald Trump says both of those dear friends are...
Yes, Queen of Sheba, I don't know what you're trying to say. You got
Donald
mixed
Trump says,
signals.
quote,
Yeah,
Times
make it a
article
little
under
more
the headline,
clear. You would have to be mental to leave your border open and Israel about to be on their own. What are you talking about? Get your ass up out of here, girl. I don't, you stuck on stupid. I asked you a question. I didn't, bye. Y'all say bye to Sheba, stoop. Get your stoop ass on up out of here. I asked you a question, answer it. You got life and bullshit confused. It's my platform, not yours. You understand? Now go on over there and say whatever the hell you want to say. If I ask you a question, answer it. Or just shut up. Yeah, you didn't want to be called out on your stupidness. Yeah. Now come back, make you another page and come back so I can catch your ass slipping again. Okay?
White House they served in was mentally ill. If that was said at any point in time during or after a presidency, it would be huge news. But now, it's buried inside a longer New York Times article under the headline, Trump's erratic behavior and extreme comments revive mental health debate. The article shows
that deflection got her put on out early.
Ever said that the president and the White House they served in was mentally ill. If that was said at any point in time during or after a presidency, it would be huge news. But now, it's buried inside a longer New York Times article under the headline, Trump's erratic behavior and extreme comments revive mental health debate. The article shows a photograph of Donald Trump with a couple of his favorite people, Tucker Carlson, and then Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. In 2022, just having the time of their lives. And now Donald Trump says both of those dear friends are, as he puts it, low IQ. Donald Trump says, quote, they're nut jobs, troublemakers, and will say anything necessary for some free and cheap publicity. And Donald Trump says that about them because they oppose his war in Iran. Donald Trump's flip against those former friends is now counted in the New York Times today as one of the indicators of Donald Trump's, quote, erratic behavior. The Times quotes Donald Trump's threat to Iran last week, saying a whole civilization will die tonight, a threat that is in and of itself a war crime. And the Times turns to Ty Cobb, who was a White House lawyer in Donald Trump's first term, to quote him, telling Jim Acosta that Donald Trump is, quote, a man who is clearly insane. And that is from Donald Trump's former friend and lawyer. In the Times assessment of Donald Trump's apparent cognitive decline, Democratic Senate Leader Chuck Schumer is quoted calling Donald Trump an extremely sick person and unhinged. And Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin's letter to the White House physician requesting an evaluation of Donald Trump is quoted, noting signs consistent with dementia and cognitive decline and increasingly incoherent, volatile, profane, deranged, and threatening tantrums. And so in a period where much of the news media is catching up to this program's coverage of Donald Trump's mental health, which began 10 years
Prince
ago
Cat.
here,
Well, who's Prince Cat? Let me
Donald
find it.
Trump
Hold
added
on.
considerably to John Kelly's case that he is,
Prince
in
of Cat.
fact,
Okay, hold
mentally
on.
ill by posting this image of himself appearing as a Christ-like savior. How much dementia does it take for the President of the
I don't
United
see
States
it.
to send that false image of himself around the world? Is that what John Kelly means by mental illness? This is one of the rare Trump social media posts that he removed, actually took down, after being criticized for presenting himself as God in what amounts to blasphemy for many of Donald Trump's right-wing Christian nationalist supporters. Donald Trump then defended that image, saying that it's really an image of him as a doctor. That's what he said. That's a doctor, not an image of him as Jesus Christ.
I don't see
If we
Prince
put
of
that image
Cat.
back up, you can wonder
Oh,
why
there
he
you
didn't
go.
explain what that thing is in his left hand in the image, the magical glowing orb that none of us have ever seen in a doctor's office. But let's just take the man who John
else
Kelly
need to get
says
put
is
out,
mentally
y'all?
ill at his word. Let's just pretend for a moment that the imagery there was very clear and it was actually Donald Trump as a doctor. Let's pretend it was Donald Trump in a white coat with a stethoscope around his neck. How would that be any less insane? And anyone who is demanding more proof
Got him.
of the insanity of Donald Trump has to recognize that you're asking for more proof than his White House lawyer Ty Cobb needed to declare Donald Trump insane and to say it publicly. And you're asking for more proof than Donald Trump's longest-running White House chief of staff, John Kelly, needed to call Donald Trump mentally ill. But if you are asking for more proof that Donald Trump is insane, there is his latest military announcement about the war he started with Iran without being able to explain why he started that war. Donald Trump has announced that the United States Navy will now blockade the Strait of Hormuz. Now, recall that the day before Donald Trump's war began, the Strait of Hormuz was wide open to shipping of all kinds, and it has been during every other war in the Middle East. It was only because Donald Trump started a war against Iran that Iran decided on the strategy of closing the Strait of Hormuz. And then, in the single most foolish strategic shift in the history of American warfare, Donald Trump's immediate goal in the war he started was then opening the Strait of Hormuz, which was open before he started his war. And having failed completely to open the Strait of Hormuz, Donald Trump's next strategy was to say, I, Donald Trump, will close the Strait of Hormuz, will block the Strait of Hormuz. So Iran blocked the Strait of Hormuz. Donald Trump wants them to open it. They won't open it, so Donald Trump says, I will block it. Is that anything other than outright screaming insanity?
Mental.
CENTCOM had to correct Donald Trump's public declaration about his intention of blocking the strait to say, CENTCOM's correction was to say that the United States Navy was going to not blockade the Strait of Hormuz, but blockade or try to blockade ships entering and exit Iranian ports. If anything, not even clear that they're going to do that.
A healthy liver helps your body process food.
All right, Dad, what are you making?
My new go-to one.
What does that have to do with you?
No one who voted against Donald Trump 3 times can be surprised by any of this Trump madness. He was clearly the stupidest person ever to win a major party nomination in 2016 when he became the Republican nominee for president the first time. Donald Trump reeked of stupidity then in everything he said about every one of his childlike fantasies about how government or the presidency could work, beginning with Mexico will pay for the wall. Everyone who voted against Donald Trump 3 times knew that he should never be trusted with the nuclear codes. Everyone who voted against Donald Trump 3 times knew that he could never possibly carry out the role of commander-in-chief of the American military. And so now the president, who John Kelly thought was mentally ill in his first term, has launched a war that is now defined by a madman posting images of himself as Jesus Christ while he is telling the Pope that the Pope is wrong. And we got here because Donald Trump, in his first term, when his White House chief of staff thought he was mentally ill, tore up the greatest diplomatic achievement of our lifetimes, the deal negotiated by Secretary of State John Kerry and President Obama, in which Iran agreed not to develop nuclear weapons. And this weekend, not surprisingly, Donald Trump's vice president failed to reach an agreement with Iran on anything. It would have been considered a huge victory for J.D. Vance to achieve even half of what John Kerry and our next guest, Under Secretary of State Wendy Sherman, achieved in their negotiations with Iran. And where was Donald Trump during the crucial moments of this weekend's negotiations with Iran? In another sign that Donald Trump is mentally ill, he is at an ultimate fighting festival.
Paul, put that on the super chat or super sticker.
Know how to fake being presidential in time of war or ever. And Donald Trump doesn't.
Yeah, put that on the super chat or super sticker. Don't start a debate for free off of me. Yeah, support my platform and then start a debate. You understand? Thank you, Nella. Yeah, so I deleted that. Put it on the super chat or super sticker. Thank you very much.
Know how to fake, at least appearing to be sane. Moments of this weekend's negotiations with Iran.
You're trying to deflect.
Another sign that Donald Trump is mentally ill. He is at an ultimate fighting festival in Miami because Donald Trump doesn't even know how to fake being presidential in time of war or ever. And Donald Trump doesn't know how to fake, at least appear.
He do know how to fake. He faking like he a president. He fake like he care about the country. Yeah, he think he fake about somebody being against war or not crime, and you the biggest criminal. The biggest organized crime criminal, crime lord, and then you gonna try to put somebody is against crime. No, it's always opposite with Donald Trump. Y'all, we gotta remember that. Whatever he's calling somebody, he's saying that about himself. What did they not see coming? Let's see. What is it?
It's Ken Harbaugh with the Midas Touch Network. The numbers are staggering. Special elections are showing 20-point swings away from Republicans. Democrats have already flipped 30 seats in state and local elections before a single midterm ballot has been cast.
Spring day. My name is John Stewart. We have a great show for you today. Great show. Later on, I'll be talking to.
Why are they playing in our faces still? Because the closer he get, the more they play to being exposed.
And an Israeli who traveled their homeland and I assume walked into a bar. So honestly, it's an incredible.
Oh, I guess that question, yeah, wasn't that important. Yeah, that's what I thought.
This conflict to find reconciliation and healing. It's a message of compassion. shared by many in the world today, including Chicago-born, Villanova-educated Pope Leo the 14th.
Let those who have the power to unleash wars choose peace. Not a peace imposed by force, but through dialogue.
Well, he don't know how to
Pope became
talk.
Pope and suddenly became too good for English. But still, beautiful, compassionate message that I cannot imagine anyone, really, anyone, I can't think of it. It does not come into my book that anyone hearing the Pope's message in peace will have some kind of a weird problem with it.
Overnight, President Trump lashing out at Pope Leo on Truth Social, calling the first American Pope weak and a loser.
I am really starting to sour on this president. Man, what is going through Trump's mind? Hey, what did the Pope say? He wants what? Dialogue? Peace? He wants to choose the noblest aspirations of mankind to show humanity at its greatest articulation? That loser. That guy's a loser. That guy who died and made him. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, that's who died. Okay. Oh, really? There was a vote. White smoke. Interesting. Hold on. Yeah. I'm going to have to claim it. Okay. And look, President Trump, I know the Vatican's been critical of your policies, but you got to remember that at the end of the day, you and the Catholic Church both historically care deeply about the same thing, covering up sex scandals.
Oh, yeah, right. Well.
By the way, Trump's comments about the Pope.
I asked y'all where y'all think it started at.
But please don't worry. It gets worse.
In a separate social media message, the president shared an image of himself in a religious scene that appears to depict Trump as Jesus.
Oh my God! Wait, the guy in the bed, can I just... Are you... Wait, the guy in the bed, can I just... Are you... Am I okay? What the f? Wait, what? How did I mean, look, I know I don't have the vigor and spunk of my MTV days, but I didn't know we were here already. I didn't realize my look had reached leper territory. I mean, from the picture, it looks like it was touch and go with me for a while. Thank God in my time of need I was surrounded by family. There's my darling wife, Amy Lynn, hands clasped in prayer. My brother, Sergeant Chiseljaw. Oh, look at the back. There's Pappy Joe. He and I stormed the Capitol together, me and Pappy Joe. And up at the top there's the eagle that delivers my mail, and apparently the lead singer of War is in the middle of there. Look at just the bottom there. It looks like it's just a guy's hand. Not mine, just some other guy's hand. Seems to be taking advantage of my infirmity to touch my penis. I don't know why. This is freaking me the out. You know, the whole thing happening outside the watchful eye of daytime fireworks. You know, I'm just glad that Jesus Trump brought his healing orb. By the way, can I tell you my favorite thing about this movie? I like how there's only so much AI can do. Like, AI is like, look, I can give you the fireworks and the healing powers, and I can make you Jesus, but you weigh what you weigh. Sorry, it just is what it is. Listen, I plugged in all the shit. Give me the flag, make me Jesus, do the Eagles. And then he was like, and make me 185. And I'm like, can't do it. You're going to have to be fat, Jesus. Sorry, chubs. That's me entering the program. Now, apparently, not everyone in the Christian community took too kindly to Trump portraying himself this way, and the backlash was bad enough that Trump was forced to come up with his own incredibly plausible cover story.
Mr. President, did you post that picture of yourself depicted as Jesus Christ?
Well, it wasn't depicted. It was me. I did post it, and I thought it was me as a doctor.
He thought it was him as a doctor.
That's you as a doctor. Oh, I'm sorry. What's this? Urgent care? Is that an urgent care? Is that what that is?
His name is Cody.
Why don't you own it, you big puss bag? You put yourself out there as Jesus. You got f***ing called on it, and now you're like, God, do you even care about lying to us anymore? Is it over? Is this relationship gone?
Doctor.
Your lies used to have a real spark. They lead the 2020 election, and now the best you've got is, oh, it wasn't Jesus. I'm a doctor.
A doctor.
You need to find your happy place and fast. We expect better lives, sir. And can I just remind you, Mr. President, we're in the middle of a blinding war with Iran. Can you just address that in a straightforward way with the American people without all this other weird shit going on? Can you just do that once?
I don't think it gets much more hostile than Iran. They're capable fighters. They're very tough people. And there are others like that. You don't mind when the enemy is weak, but that enemy is strong.
Yeah, he called him strong. He's sick. Telling y'all he got more than one, a clone. And they say different stuff.
About it too, right? You see it. Oh, thank God. I'm so glad they see it. You know, clearly I've been on a lot of leprosy meds, so I don't, a lot of hallucinations and shit. By the way, the surreal image of the president running through his cavalcade of grievances next to the Easter Bunny was not exclusive to the balcony. Poor Peter Conta had to listen to this bullshit all day.
Peter Pan.
We've broken every record on the stock market. We've broken every record in our military. And we are the most respected country anywhere in the world with the greatest military. Mr. Jameson Greer, have you heard? He's right here. Come on over here. How are we doing on trade? It's a big country. They can't fight back. They have no capability. NATO should be ashamed of themselves. This is about eggs. Eggs.
I'm sorry. That's insane. I can't help but think that if Jesus came back to see the White House Easter event, he'd be like, I think you may have misunderstood my message. At one point, the Easter Bunny got so bad, you're not sure if it was an episode of The Office.
Did anybody in the egg industry vote for Kamala? A low IQ person. She's a low IQ person.
In the middle of it, the Easter Bunny does one of these.
His turn.
At one point, the Easter Bunny got so bad, you're not sure if it was an episode of The Office.
Did anybody in the egg industry vote for Kamala? A low IQ person. She's a low IQ person.
In the middle of it, the Easter Bunny does one of these. He landed it, and his eyes don't move. His head is immobile, and he still landed the... You believe this? How up do you have to be for an adult in a bunny suit to go, all right, now I'm embarrassed? But back to Iran. If you remember correctly, about a week ago, Donald Trump had given Iran a deadline to open up the Strait of Hormuz or face the end of their civilization. And while Iran neither opened up the Strait of Hormuz or faced the end of their civilization, they did agree to a 2-week ceasefire. And to meet in Islamabad, Pakistan, to talk. Let's go there now.
The fate of the U.S.-Iran war is hanging in the balance.
The collective world holding its breath.
Highest stakes talks between the U.S. and Iran in many years.
In the balance, the lives of millions of people across the Middle East and the fate of the global economy.
My God, these negotiations couldn't be more critical. We're going to need everybody. Bunny, pack your eggs. We're going to Pakistan. But what luck for the United States, because what Iran might not realize is our president is the greatest negotiator in the history of his book. We are talking about this year's recipient of the FIFA Peace Prize and some f***ing gold thing from Apple. And they don't just give those to anyone. I had the inflection wrong. They don't give those to anyone. I would have loved to see those Iran negotiators' faces when the formidable negotiator-in-chief, Donald Jehoshaphat Trump, entered those talks on Saturday in Islamabad. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it because, I shit you not, he went to a UFC fight with Dana White. Now, before you criticize the President of the United States for attending a UFC fight around the same time that America and Iran are locked in high-stakes negotiations in Islamabad, you do have to understand that he had fantastic seats. Like super close, like uncomfortably weird and close.
You're a beautiful guy. Great fighter. Thanks to give you a hug. You look so good. You're too good looking to be a fighter. You are some fighter. Thank you, man.
Hey, one last thing. You wouldn't mind trying on a bunny suit, would you?
That's your president.
Now let's see where those eggs come out of. Come on. I don't really understand Easter. All right. Well, it. It's fine. The president didn't need to be in Islamabad. I'm sure he can delegate some of the heavy lifting to his accomplished Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who, is also at the fight? Come on! And by the way, what in the pit bull are those hand signals? No disrespect to Marco repping the 305, but if Trump isn't in Islamabad and Marco Rubio isn't in Islamabad, who exactly is in Islamabad handling these extremely delicate negotiations?
Hey guys, good morning. Thanks for coming.
Jane Dolores Vance, you world peace depends on chubby face Mogoon. Well, all right, fine. I remain open-minded. Let's set the scene. Obviously, the last Iran agreement took the Obama administration 20 months to negotiate. And this time, there's a wide gap between the U.S. position and the Iranian position. The U.S. is asking for an unconditional surrender. Iran is asking for control of the Strait of Hormuz, nuclear enrichment, and money. I'm glad the Pakistanis are setting the stage for what will be extensive and grueling talks.
The host country declaring a national holiday, implementing a lockdown in the capital of Islamabad.
The Pakistani government welcomed both delegations with flowers as they both got off the plane.
The building was decked out in branding. There were signs that read, Islamabad Talks. Reporters were offered specially branded Brewed for Peace coffee.
Peace talks have a f***ing signature cocktail? Are the countries registered? You know, I apologize. I'm sorry. Respect Pakistan for taking this seriously and for locking the U.S. and Iran in for the long haul.
U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance and his delegation are headed home.
A failure.
What? It's over already. Oh my God.
They knew they wasn't going to be able to get no deal. They didn't want one. It was a deflection.
Did J.D. Vance just Rubik's Cube world peace? Just zap, bap, bap, boom? You know,
Old girl story's going to come out.
I thought you were some kind of incompetent, unlikable, cytoplasmic apparition
Amanda.
In a bag filled with cynical ambition, a cipher whose only principle is devotion to power. But you're not that at all. You are a competent, unlikable, cytoplasmic apparition of a meat bag.
U.S. officials say there's no deal following 16 hours of negotiations with Iran.
Wait, and you didn't even get... Wait, you went home and didn't even get a deal? It failed, and you just came home? That... Well, I'm sorry. Don't be too hard on yourself. You did give it almost a day. I mean, we all knew that's what it took to build Rome. Jesus, couldn't you have just thrown down some of that peace coffee and pulled an all-nighter? No, let's resume in the morning and build on some momentum. Just, I gotta go, I don't want to miss euphoria. At least tell us after all this, there were some concessions.
I hate that I can't keep this a secret. I canceled all my food delivery subscriptions and upgraded to Cook Unity. And it's totally transformed the way I eat because every meal is
Paul
crafted
tried
by
it, didn't he? I said put it on the super chatter super sticker. He tried to. Now he can't write it out.
Today, a U.S. military blockade of all ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz.
Wait, now we're blocking it? What kind of f***ed up Godfather? You think you're gonna close the strait? No. No, my friend, we're closing the strait. You think you can kick me in the balls? No, watch this. Are we ever gonna get this Hormuz straight? I'm telling you, man, it's all starting to fall apart in MAGA world. The whole thing's spread too thin. Even Trump's overseas allies are in trouble.
Viktor Orban, one of President Trump's closest allies in Europe, is facing his toughest challenge as he tries to win a fifth term as Prime Minister.
Well, no, that shouldn't be a problem. We all know Trump is the endorser-in-chief. He shows up to a rally. Almost inevitably, that person gets elected. Is Trump going to head to Hungary to prop up his boy Orban?
No, it didn't work.
Who else could you say?
Hey guys, good morning.
Apparently, a couple of days before J.D. Vance shit the bed in Islamabad, he took a practice crap in Budapest.
J.D. Vance treated the crowd to a phone call live from Donald Trump. Here's how it all played out.
I actually had a special guest that asked that I give him a phone call, and we'll see. Let's hope he actually answers, but this is going to be very embarrassing. All right.
I'm sorry, the person you
Uh-uh.
has a voicemail box that has not been set up yet.
Okay.
Wow. How embarrassing.
J.D. Vance has the same relationship with President Trump that we have with Comcast's customer service. That's incredible. Can I tell you my favorite part of the whole thing was the sort of Vegas magician part at the beginning with the phone. Hey, I've got a special friend. But JD, you flew all the way over there. Give her another go.
Okay. Try one more time. I get a good signal here. It's ringing. It's progress. Mr. President, you are on with about 5,000 Hungarian patriots, and I think they love you even more than they love Viktor Orban.
Oh my God, you ass-kissing, cytoplasmic, blah, 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 what I said earlier. God. But you know what? I'm sure that by pulling out the big guns, having Donald Trump and J.D. Vance throw all of the American power behind Viktor Orban is sure to pay dividends.
Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban was voted out of power in a massive landslide.
And scene! Please, God, let the dam be breaking. Folks, this has been a truly shit year, as we have all been at the mercy of the mercurial whims of a megalomaniacal man baby. And we are tired. The presidency is supposed to age the president, not the people. But I'm telling you, there is hope. The air of Donald Trump's invincibility is being slowly eroded by world events and his own heart's ability to clear liquid from his capillaries. That's why a bunch is at the bottom. But we cannot give in to the sadness. We must embrace these moments of light and hope and oxygen. Even MAGA is beginning to realize the depths of this man's depravity. No matter how much we love the person he's healing. And I do appreciate it. And to the dismay of Donald Trump and his acolytes, an illiberal autocrat who... And I do appreciate it. And to the dismay of Donald Trump and his acolytes, an illiberal autocrat who controlled the media, stacked the judiciary, and manipulated the electoral process of his country has been crushed. Because the people of Hungary stood up and said, this. We must remember these moments of hope. I'm going to show you something. These are Hungarians. It's not where we are right now. But I am starting to believe it is where we could be soon. Drink in their jubilation. Take solace and strength from their joy. All right, that might be a little much. But you know what? Sure, it. Dance like that. And remember, as we grind through these next 2.5 years, it ain't over till the Freddie Mercury sings.
Oh yeah, they celebrated. We are the champions.
We'll get there soon.
Let me see what's next. Let's see.
Why do so many people trust iHerb for their health and wellness products? Simple. We guarantee freshness. Buy direct from manufacturers. Wow, Prime Minister Mark Carney of Canada brought the House down at the Liberal Party convention in Montreal. He was not holding back in his scathing condemnation of Donald Trump, but most importantly, his apotheosis to Canada. Canada strong, Canada unites, Canada the leader of the free world. As Donald Trump has tanked the United States, Canada soars, and Prime Minister Carney used this incredible speech to convey the accomplishments, not just of his tenure as the Prime Minister of Canada, but of the people of Canada, of the Midas Maple. Shout out to you all standing up right now for human rights, for dignity, for Canada, for the free world. Watch as Prime Minister Carney just laid it all out to a standing
hit the like button
ovation.
for me.
Play this clip.
The days of our military sending 70 cents of every dollars to the United States are over.
Oh, wow.
We are going to build Canada strong with Canada steel, Canadian aluminum, Canadian lumber, Canadian workers.
And then Prime Minister Carney said that Canada, we are the masters of our own destiny. Play this clip.
No, this is not the time for politics as usual, for petty differences, for political point scoring. United, we will build Canada strong. A Canada for all, a Canada strong that no one can ever take away. I feel that strength in this room. I feel that strength. I feel that strength. As Diana mentioned, we feel that strength across this great country. At this decisive moment, Canadians are demonstrating just how strong we are. You know, it started quietly. People choosing a wine from the Okanagan over one from California. Anyone had any bourbon recently? No. Sorry. A family planning a vacation to Prince Edward Island instead of booking flights to Florida. Canadians are rediscovering our country. The Cabot Trail in October. The Columbia Ice Field in June. Le Festival International de Jazz à Montréal en juillet. The prairies at harvest where the sky goes on forever. You know, Canada's tourism sector had a record-breaking summer, 50,000 more train rides, 13% more visits to our national parks, 15% more visits to our national museums. Small individual acts of solidarity, but repeated millions of times. And together, they make a statement. We are the masters of our destiny. Nous sommes nés chez nous, sans doute, sans exception.
Prime Prime Minister Carney then said, now is not the time for nostalgia. We can't look back at the way it was. We must look forward. This has been more than even just a rupture on the relationship between Canada and the United States. This, of course, is a massive betrayal, and we've seen with the Trump regime. But now Canada rises, Canada strong, elbows up. Watch Prime Minister Carney deliver what may be the best speech I've seen yet all year. Play this clip.
Some are still in denial. Rather than starting on this journey, they're waiting for the past to return. No. But hope is not a plan, and nostalgia is not a strategy. And if we stand still during this rupture, we will surrender our future to others. My friends, technological change is accelerating. We can either shape our future with AI or let it control our destiny. The foundations of the international order, the order which Canada helped build and from which we have benefited for so long, that order is crumbling.
And then more from Prime Minister Carney here, talking about how Canada pulled together through tragedies, through crisis, and how Canada has made it out stronger because Canadians look out for each other with basic values, principles, love, compassion, empathy. Play this clip.
Of everything Canadians have done this past year, the most moving has been how we've looked out for each other, including amidst the worst tragedies. Think of the good people of Tumbler Ridge. When the unimaginable happened, first responders were at the school within 2 minutes. Teachers shielded their children. Neighbors held each other for comfort. Right after the shooting, Jim Caruso packed his bags, traveled over 1,000 kilometers to support families. And Jim said, I want to hug people, pray for them, and most importantly, cry with them. That's Canada. Looking out for each other, standing together when things get tough so that they can get better. I'm right there with you. Canada's new government is right there with you, inspired by hard-working, always caring Canadians. From now on, for example, with our new Buy Canadian policy, when the federal government spends, we will select Canadian suppliers by default. The days of our military sending 70 cents of every dollar to the United States are over. We are going to build Canada strong with Canada Steel, Canadian aluminum, Canadian lumber, Canadian workers. Hey.
Prime Minister Carney then also talks about how it seemed like for a while we were driving over or traveling over black ice with all these headwinds as well with what was going on with the Trump regime and how the United States was treating us. But Canada stood strong. Play this clip.
A year ago, just over a year ago, in the midst of a blizzard, we started down the road to make the best country in the world even better. We should be under no illusions. The path we've chosen is hard. There'll be headwinds, black ice, steep climbs along the way. We'll have to be pragmatic and determined to keep moving forward. But this is the journey that we must make, because we are meeting in the middle of a transformation that will define our country for generations. And Canadians sense it.
Then Prime Minister Carney talks about reliable alliances. Let's play it.
From the coalition of the willing to defend Ukraine, to work, we will not rest, to working with Nordic countries in the UK to protect our Arctic. We are defending Canada and Canadian values with reliable partners.
If a donation makes sense for you right now, I'm asking you to pitch in to the Democratic Party's fight.
It's a more dangerous and divided world. That's the reality. So we are no longer relying just on the strength of our values. We are also building the value of our strength. And as we do, we're reviving the ambitious spirit that built Canada. Our country was forged by Indigenous peoples and voyageurs who mapped this continent. Think about it. They mapped this continent and they built vast trading networks from coast to coast to coast before the Americans had even left St. Louis.
More from Prime Minister Carney right here. Let's play this clip.
Right now, everyone sees the main threat as the Trump tariffs. But the challenge is greater. The challenge will be, as it's always been, to foster unity and the common good. End quote. Bob's right. Canadians are being called to serve, but not against something, for each other. And that is why you're here. Because you believe, like I believe, that Canada is only strong when it works for everyone. That's our objective. And that's our heritage. After all, Canada is a nation forged through accommodation, not assimilation. Through partnership, not domination. The founding insight of our country is that unity does not require uniformity. This is neither a myth nor a miracle, but a series of choices made imperfectly across generations. Pragmatic decisions that have become a moral conviction. That our differences are a strength to be nurtured, not a risk to be managed.
And then Prime Minister Carney leaves this speech by talking about virtue, by talking about Canadians being a virtuous people, and how when Canadians stand for values, principles, unity, love, when they stand with marginalized communities and not bully, when they stand with their Indigenous communities, when they stand with freedom, that's what makes Canada the leader of the free world right now, and Prime Minister Carney, the leader of the free world. And just think about where things were over a year ago, 12, 16 months ago or so, when Donald Trump started doing the 51st state and the bullying, and wow, how the tables have turned. Prime Minister Carney ends his speech
Dana, I don't know what that means.
ovation. Watch
Y'all
what took
kill
place.
me
Everybody play
putting it
this clip.
in ways that
Virtue
only means
is
something
like a
to
muscle.
you.
It grows
If you
with
don't
exercise.
listen, if you don't want us to
When
fully
we are
understand
kind,
what you're talking about, keep your comment to yourself or use it on your own page. Don't come over here dropping comments where only you understand what you are saying. So I'm going to remove your comment because I don't have any idea what you're talking about. You could be saying something satanic on the cool, and I don't know what the fuck you saying. So don't come over here doing that because I will remove you. Okay? And how you feel is how you feel, but I have to understand it over here because too many satanic people walking around still drinking the Kool-Aid, and we don't drink the Kool-Aid over here. You understand? I need to fully understand it. Hi, Tara. Thank you, Tara, for the super sticker. I greatly appreciate it. Oh, okay, but I still need to understand it in my chat. It could be something that is inappropriate in my chat. Okay, but your answer was not direct. Not to me. Now, let me go and get you. I'll come back another day. And come back another day when you fully understand what I'm saying on my platform. You understand? I don't give a shit about what somebody else is saying. I made it clear what I was saying. So come back another day where you can follow my rules and guidelines on my platform. We understand? Y'all don't run shit over here. Y'all guests. You are a guest. So stay in a guest place. I said what I said is not going to change. I need to be able to understand it because it's my platform. I run my shit. If you don't like it, bye. But hit the like button, you know. I'm serious as a heart attack, though. Don't come over here on that.
Of the free world, and just think about where things were over a year ago, 12, 16 months ago or so,
Y'all
when
kill me
Donald
thinking
Trump
it's y'all
started doing the
entitled.
51st
Y'all
state
so damn
and the
entitled.
bullying, and wow, have the tables have turned. Prime Minister Carney ends his speech with a standing ovation. Watch what took place. Everybody play this clip.
That virtue is like a muscle. It grows with exercise. When we are kind, kindness grows. When we seek unity, unity grows. When we are Canadian, Canada grows. And when we are all in for Canada, we will build Canada strong for all. Merci beaucoup et vive le Canada!
Now, it's such an honor here at the Midas Touch Network to have launched Midas Canada, to have the support of all of the Midas Maple out there, the Maple Midas. Shout out to you all, and Midas Touch as we continue to expand, whether it's in Canada, Australia, throughout Europe.
Shout out to you, Ben, and Canada. I don't have no problem with Canada. Let me get to this space in the past. Hit the like button, please. Iran war expert. The most dangerous stage.
Why is Amazon paying me $20,000 a month? Well, I didn't make this kind of money selling yoga mats.
For joining us here this hour, super happy to have you here. So imagine you are a small country. You're very proud, very important country, but you are little and you are not very rich. And you decide in your little country that it is time to put in streetlights. Right? You think we may not be a wealthy country, but gosh darn it, it is the 21st century, and in a bunch of our little towns and villages that want them, we're going to put in streetlights, or we're going to upgrade streetlights in places that need them to be fixed up. We're going to get funding, we'll get grants for streetlights, and we're going to do that all over the place in our country. Now, if you are a town that wants in on this project, if you want some streetlights for your town, what your government tells you is, okay, here's how you're going to do it. Your town, your village, if you want streetlights, what you have to do is you have to hire this particular company. And it's a consulting company, and that consulting company will assess your town's needs. And after they do an assessment in your town, they will basically attest to what kind of streetlights you need, and then those are the kind of streetlights you will get. That's the process. That's how we're getting streetlights in our country. And it turns out that as all the little towns all over the country start going through this process to get their streetlights, they all, as they are told to do, they all hire this one company, this one consulting firm to help them get their streetlights. And a couple of things pretty quickly emerge. First of all, that company, the company they're all told they have to use in order to get their streetlights, that company turns out to be owned by a guy who's in business with the Prime Minister's son-in-law. And the business he's in with the Prime Minister's son-in-law, the company they own together, turns out to be a company that makes streetlights. Huh. What a coincidence, right? So every little town all over your country has to hire this one company. And every single time, the guy who runs that company comes in, looks around and says, yes, I've looked at this very carefully. I've assessed your unique needs here in your town. And it turns out the only streetlights you should get, the only streetlights you can get, the streetlights, in fact, that you're going to get are the streetlights that are only sold by the company that is owned by the Prime Minister's son-in-law and also me. That is your only choice. You want streetlights, that's how you get them. And even though these guys had no streetlight expertise, even though their company was brand new, essentially set up just for this purpose, even though basically nobody else had ever bought streetlights from them before without being forced to do so, now, all of a sudden, boy, do they have a lot of business. Yeah, the Prime Minister's son-in-law turns out to be basically the sole supplier of streetlights to towns and villages all over the country. And as such, he is paid very handsomely for that.
I love you.
In public funds.
Thank you for the floating heart.
The country where this happened
and the flowers.
And it turns out the funding for the streetlights came from the European Union, from the EU. When investigative reporters figured out that this scheme was happening with the streetlights, and when the EU investigated themselves, they realized this, well-intentioned project, sort of small-scale project.
I don't know if you saw, I came to sit with you for a little bit last night.
Basically just a project to make the Prime Minister's son-in-law a millionaire.
Going
the company,
up on
of course,
Woo.
says they did nothing wrong, but the EU pulled their funding for that project. How did the Prime Minister react to that? He said, well, okay, I guess we can't do this with EU funds anymore. We'll just pay for it ourselves, our country. Out of our meager budget as one of the poorest countries in Europe, we'll pay for it. which means the prime minister decided that he would just pay his son-in-law directly from government funds. And that is how Viktor Orban's son-in-law made his first millions. Since then, over the course of Viktor Orban's 16 years in power, Orban's son-in-law has become one of the wealthiest men in the whole country, worth hundreds of millions of dollars at least. One of the sectors he's in is streetlights. Another sector is that he owns lots of luxury hotels. I mentioned the EU, the European Union. The EU has a presidency that rotates from country to country every 6 months. When the EU presidency automatically rotated to Hungary, to Viktor Orban a couple years ago, what that meant in very practical terms is that there would be lots of official delegations from other European countries coming to Hungary all the time, coming to Budapest to do EU business, because Viktor Orban was the president of the EU for that 6-month period. What some of those other countries would soon find was that no matter what hotels they booked themselves into in Budapest for one of these official visits, the Orban government would somehow find a way to unbook them from the hotels they wanted to stay at, and instead they would find themselves magically rebooked into one of the hotels owned by Viktor Orban's son-in-law. They would make reservations at different hotels, and the Orban government would unbook them and put them in his son-in-law's hotels instead. That was uncovered by investigative reporting from Direct 36 and V-Square in Hungary. Viktor Orban's son-in-law has had a good time of it, while his father-in-law has been in effectively dictatorial control of the country of Hungary. The FT reported last year that he nearly doubled his net worth to almost 500 million euros just in the previous year alone. Nice. But ahead of the elections yesterday in Hungary, which saw that young man's father-in-law turfed out of power after 16 years and potentially now facing prosecution for corruption and theft of public assets. Ahead of yesterday's election in Hungary, Orban's son-in-law left the country. He left Hungary and reportedly relocated to the friendlier environs of the United States.
I hate that I can't keep this a secret. I canceled all my food delivery subscriptions and upgraded to Cook Unity, and it's totally
And forgive me, I am terrible with Hungarian names, so I don't know exactly how to pronounce the son-in-law's name. You can see it there. It's spelled Istvan Tiborcz. I don't know exactly how you say that name, but I think that it's pronounced Jared. I think that's not true, but that is one way to pronounce it. Istvan, Jared. Trumpism in the United States is not just a purely personal thing. Trumpism in the United States is not just a big political manifestation of the quirky authoritarian personality of Donald Trump the man. I mean, it may be that for Trump himself, but in terms of power, in terms of governance, in terms of why all these other people on the American far right like Trump in power and what they want to do with Trump in power, it's not just based on Trump's personality. It's actually based on a model. More than anything else, it is based on the model of Viktor Orban in Hungary. Remember Project 2025? The Heritage Foundation created Project 2025 to plan out what exactly the Trump administration would do once they got into power, and the Trump administration has followed that blueprint very tightly. The head of the Heritage Foundation says outright that in looking for a model for how conservatives should approach power and government, he said Viktor Orban is not a model of how to do that. He says Viktor Orban is the model for how to do that. And so even though Hungary is this tiny little country, I mean, Hungary's whole population is the size of New Jersey. The Trump movement has nevertheless been obsessed with it from the very beginning. I mean, J.D. Vance, Vice President J.D. Vance, just called Viktor Orban the greatest statesman, one of the only true statesmen in Europe. Under Orban's leadership, Hungary has become, by some measures, the single poorest country in the European Union.
Who? Oh, Hungary.
Hungary is tied with Bulgaria for the most corrupt country in the European Union. It's got the highest cumulative inflation in the whole European Union.
And Trump
Hungary's
supported
inflation in the past 6 years is double what it is in the rest of the EU. Hungary's salaries are less than half the average of what people get paid elsewhere in the EU. Its unemployment is the highest it's been in 10 years. Its total economic growth in the whole country last year was an anemic 0.4%. 0.4%. That said, you know what? Our economic growth at the end of last year was basically just as bad. It was 0.5%. Because, you know, turns out all of these guys have all the same ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out illiberal, authoritarian leaders are really bad for their countries. They might be good for themselves and their families, but their economic performance in particular is always terrible. And it's funny, what pushed out Viktor Orban after all these years, I mean, his economic performance in office really has been absolutely terrible for the people of his country, as Donald Trump's time in office is turning out to be for us. But somehow, in Hungary, somehow Jared, I mean, whatever his name is, somehow Viktor Orban's son-in-law has become one of the wealthiest people in that whole part of Europe. And then he has apparently fled that country with all of his money and come here instead. Viktor Orban's close childhood friend, a plumber, who somehow became the richest person in the entire country of Hungary. He's rich enough that the political opposition to Orban this summer started organizing field trips. They called them safaris for ordinary Hungarians to go to that guy's house, to go drive around the immense private zoo full of exotic animals that Orban's best friend had built for himself after Orban shoveled him so much money that he became a billionaire off of contracts from Orban's government. Started off as a plumber, is now the richest man in the country with a huge private zoo. Thousands of ordinary Hungarians came. People came from all over the country, lines of cars stretching for miles, all there to see the private zoo Orban's corruption had paid for with their tax dollars. You know how in this country we have people dressed up in inflatable frog costumes and stuff at our anti-ICE protests? In Hungary, people dress up in inflatable zebras, in inflatable zebra costumes. Because Viktor Orban's best friend had his billionaire private zoo stuffed full of zebras, brought there for his pleasure. Viktor Orban is the model to American Trump supporters, to the people who have insisted on supporting Donald Trump in office. It is because they look at Donald Trump, they squint, and they see Viktor Orban. Viktor Orban is the model. He's the platonic ideal of what Trump's time in power is supposed to be. Their whole idea is that Trump is supposed to follow Viktor Orban's lead, to read his blueprint and follow it, to use the power of the state to change the rules, to change everything so that he and his friends can never be removed from power, to make their illiberal regime election-proof. And with rulers like that entrenched in power so they cannot be removed, Orban was the longest-serving leader in all of Europe when he was ousted yesterday. With guys like that effectively election-proof and entrenched in power in Western countries, like in Hungary, which is part of the EU and part of NATO, or like the United States, which is the United States. The idea is that if you've got a permanent authoritarian, illiberal ruler like an Orban or a Trump in power indefinitely, you can break Europe, you can break the West, you can break NATO, you can chop up and divide the free world so that it becomes food for the permanent strongmen who will rule forever. That's the overall dream.
This is the first nonstick with no coating. The Titanium Always Pan Pro.
And here is the really loud alarm clock that just went off and woke those guys up from that dream. Strongman authoritarians like Orban and like Trump, their ongoing rule is not inevitable. It is not a fate that our countries cannot escape from. These guys are not permanently in power. They are not in power for life. as the disciplined, nonviolent, big tent, sustainable, growing resistance to Orban started to coalesce, as Orban started to look like he was going to lose, his supposedly unbreakable base of support just collapsed. The guy who just beat him is a former member of his own party. Nobody actually likes a corrupt despot. They all just support him because they think he's going to be in power forever. So you need to stay on his right side in order to get anything for yourself. When it becomes clear that that's not true, that the despot is not going to be there forever, it always, everywhere, always falls apart. It's like an ugly, mean, rich guy with a bad personality who gets lots of dates and lots of nookie all the time. And then somehow he loses his money. And he is shocked to find himself very suddenly all alone. I wonder what it was that people used to like about me that they don't like about me now. In the end, there is no one who is a true believer in a corrupt despot other than his henchmen and his family, and sometimes not even them. Did I mention that Viktor Orban's son-in-law, the streetlight millionaire, has apparently fled to the United States now? Far-right authoritarian parties that are like Trump and that have been supported by Trump have lost in the past year in Germany and in France and in the Netherlands and elsewhere. But what happened yesterday, Viktor Orban losing this election yesterday and losing in a wild, huge landslide election that just swamped everything he had done to try to make himself and his party election-proof. This is just the prototype that Trump and the Republicans had built for him, right? This is just that prototype crashing to the ground in spectacular fashion. So we're going to talk about that tonight with the former ambassador to that country under Joe Biden. One of the things the new opposition, now the new leadership of Hungary says it's going to do now that they have won and they passed Orban, is talking about essentially re-democratizing their country. Not just prosecuting people for corruption and
words
by, but they also say they want to undo
send a super chat, a super sticker while you're trying to degrade people. Support my platform. Put all of that on a super chat or a super sticker, or slow your roll.
To make it so elections.
If you want your message out, put it on a super chat or a super sticker. If not, that's too much for us to read. Yeah, while we are watching and listening. So the only way that we can stop what we're doing to read your message is to put it on a super chat or a super sticker, okay? Yeah, it's just too much. It's too much while we are paying attention to what she is saying. So the only way that we are going to stop is put your facts on the super chat or super sticker, and then we'll be able to see it on the front screen. Yeah, super chat or super sticker. Okay, that's my guidelines on my platform with all of your big old messages. Put it on a super chat or super sticker and make it stand out. Okay, thank you. I would appreciate your support. Yeah, we're going to wait for it. We're going to see how much you want your message to go out. Super chat or super sticker only. Thank you.
In spectacular fashion.
Yeah, share it on the super chat or super sticker.
Former ambassador to that country under Joe
That's
Biden.
how we going to respect
one of the things the new opposition, now the new leadership of Hungary says it's going to do now that they have won and they've ousted Orban.
Yeah, it's that box down at that bottom. Your bottom corner is a gift box, and then there's a box with a $ on it. That $, you click that, it'll take you where you can select a super sticker, a super chat, at whatever dollar amount you choose, and put your message on it. All of that what you had up, yeah, that's where you can do it. We'll check. It's at the bottom. It has a box with a $ on it. Yeah.
People for corruption and thievery, although they are going to do that, but they also say they want to undo the illiberal things that Orban and his party did to break that democracy, to break and corrupt that.
What do you mean similar to TT?
To try to make Orban's.
I don't know about TT.
grip on power effectively permanent, to make it so elections really wouldn't work anymore. I mean, that effort failed yesterday. They were swamped by the opposition. After 16 years of Orban, the people of that country rose up and threw him out in huge numbers. And so now the new leadership of that country, having ousted Orban, they say they're going to reform their system so nobody can try to do what he did again. Nobody can again try to steal that democracy and turn it into a dictatorship. We're going to talk about that tonight because I think it's a salient lesson for the Democratic Party in the United States and thinking ahead about their electoral platform, for what they will tell voters they're going to try to do and what they should try to do if they get back in power, if and when they oust Trump and his party and his movement. A program of re-democratizing the United States that undoes and bans permanently the things Trump has been trying to do to turn our country into a strongman state, to undo our constitutional republic. So it's happening right now as we speak in Hungary, and it's a lot to chew on in terms of the path that is ahead for us. Even once it was clear, that Orban was going to lose, President Trump sent his Vice President, J.D. Vance, over to Budapest, over to Hungary, to make campaign appearances with Orban, to shake his hand and stick his thumb up in the air and to say how much he was sure Viktor Orban was going to win.
And he stuck,
right before
put that
Viktor
thumb
Orban
up in
lost
the air.
in a landslide.
Hey, we love Poppy.
Why did he send J.D. Vance over to do that after it was so clear Orban was going down? It's like when Trump nominated the disgraced Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz, remember him? Nominated him to be Attorney General. Do you remember that right at the beginning of this term in Trump's presidency? I mean, they knew very quickly that Matt Gaetz definitely was not going to get through. He was not going to be confirmed. But before they made him withdraw, Trump sent J.D. Vance up to Capitol Hill to walk arm in arm with Matt Gaetz around the United States Senate to take into all those senators' offices, to give him his big endorsement and say how much he personally believed in him and how sure he was that Matt Gaetz was going to be confirmed as Attorney General, when it was already clear that Gaetz was going down. Why did Trump send him to do that? Total humiliation for J.D. Vance. I mean, they just did the exact same thing to him with Orban in Hungary, sending him over there before Orban just got shellacked. And then Trump sent him straight from there to talks with Iran, which instantly failed.
Get your
and
money,
which were probably
baby.
always going to fail. While the president said explicitly in Washington that if the talks failed, the whole war could then be blamed on J.D. Vance.
Now the war is on you.
Another.
I ain't falling for
I
no
have a challenge for you.
okie dokes.
I want to know
The war is on
if you'd
you.
like to write a book, your own book, in only 10 weeks using a proven technique that makes it so simple.
In Iran, now we have moved on from Iran blockading the Strait of Hormuz to the United States blockading the Strait of Hormuz. So if you think the war was going great before, you're going to love it from here on out. This has a clear strategic purpose, definitely, sure. The president said this weekend that lots of other countries are going to join with us to implement this blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. Apparently, no other countries are joining with us to implement this blockade. But don't worry, by meanwhile deciding to move on to attacking the Pope, at the exact moment his vice president, J.D. Vance, is starting to promote his new book about how excited he is to become a new Catholic, Donald Trump is presumably trying to so humiliate his vice president that he drives J.D. Vance to quit, which would at least give Trump a chance to pick a new vice president before the midterms, which might shake things up a bit for him and his Republican Party. Yeah, pay no attention to the $10 a gallon gas and the fact that we're now a pariah rogue state. Don't you think Vice President Jared is very impressive? Would you like him to sell you some streetlights? The pushback against Donald Trump and his administration continues to accelerate and continues to pay off for basically everyone who's willing to do it. Today, for example, Trump lost the case he had brought against the Wall Street Journal over their reporting on Trump's super creepy birthday greeting to convicted pedophile and child sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. Today, the Trump administration caved and agreed that the Stonewall National Monument in New York City will be allowed to continue to fly the pride flag that Trump had previously insisted must come down. All the people who came out to protest at Stonewall when they pulled down the pride flag, today, you won. They caved. The flag is back up now and forever. The news organizations who sued Trump and Pete Hegseth to stop the bizarre new Pentagon press policy, where they kicked all the real reporters out of the Pentagon. Those people who are suing over that policy have been winning hand over fist in court, with the judge in the case in his latest ruling denouncing what Trump and Hegseth have done there as, quote, authoritarian, saying it smacks of an autocracy, not a democracy. Even the librarians are winning. Librarians sued when Trump inexplicably tried to shut down the Institute of Museum and Library Services in Washington, which was created by Congress. It's not a high-profile organization, but if you're a librarian, it is. It's because that's the part of the federal government that funds libraries, and Trump tried to kill it. But the librarians, too, they just won in court, and that agency cannot be shut down or have its funding taken away. Everywhere people are pushing back against Trump, they are beating him. Trump's efforts to build himself a huge new network of prison camps to hold people without trial is also falling apart. And the pushback against him on this is getting pushier and frankly more effective all the time. They haven't been able to open up any of these gigantic 10,000 bed warehouses they've bought to try to turn them into Trump prison camps. They've been blocked so far by all different kinds of local protest. In 3 states, there are lawsuits that have been brought by the state against these things. One in Michigan to stop the Trump prison camp that's planned for Romulus, Michigan. One in New Jersey to stop the prison camp that's planned for Roxbury, New Jersey. And one in Maryland to stop the Trump prison camp that's planned for a site near Hagerstown. That one in Maryland has been successful thus far. It has already stopped ICE from working on that site to turn it into a prison. One thing to watch this week, the federal judge who's hearing that case is going to hold a hearing on it in federal court in Baltimore on Wednesday. The activists, the fierce, scrappy activists in Maryland who have been opposing that, they're expecting a full house, a full courthouse full of people on Wednesday in Baltimore opposing that prison camp. Also expecting a big interfaith vigil outside. That is absolutely worth watching. We reported earlier that the state of Pennsylvania last month issued an order that bans the Trump administration from hooking up any of these warehouse facilities in Pennsylvania to any local water or sewer facilities. That's from Josh Shapiro's administration in Pennsylvania. Blocking those warehouse facilities from using water or sewer means they cannot open. Well, today, the state of Maryland followed down that road. They issued an order telling the Trump administration that that Hagerstown, Maryland warehouse site cannot and will not be allowed to use local sewers. Next week, Thursday the 23rd, here's another tactic that's being used against them. People are going to be protesting next week, Thursday the 23rd in Rhode Island, at the annual shareholders meeting for Citizens Bank, to try to get Citizens Bank to cut their financial ties with companies operating Trump prison camps. 2 days after that, Saturday, April 25th, there's going to be a national day of protests all over the country against Trump trying to build himself these prison camps anywhere. Again, that national day of action planned for Saturday, April 25th. Just in the past few days, the failure of Trump's efforts to build these prison camps and local people standing up to him and saying no, even in Republican areas, those efforts just in the past few days have been the subject of national and international press, everywhere from the New York Times to the BBC to the Associated Press to the Atlantic magazine and more.
Big retailers just banned our lighter, and honestly, we're not surprised, because we didn't build this thing to sit on a shelf next to Vicks. You see, nearly every lighter still runs on butane gas. Same fuel, same problems for decades. And the moment the wind picks up or it starts raining, they die on you. The flame flickers out and you're stuck. So we asked ourselves, what if we built a lighter that literally cannot be blown out? That's exactly what we built with Lux Blaze. Instead of butane, we use Tesla coil technology. It creates a plasma arc that burns at 1,800 degrees. No gas, no fluid. And it continues.
Tonight, I'm sure you've noticed, the news out of Congress is dominated by the very dramatic announcements from two members of Congress that they are each resigning their seats effective immediately. One of them is Republican Tony Gonzalez. The other is Democrat Eric Swalwell. They have both been accused of serious sexual misconduct. Swalwell only recently, but Tony Gonzalez for months now. Both men have denied committing any crimes, but both men said tonight they will resign from the House. One Republican, one Democrat. Swalwell is also abandoning his campaign for California governor for the same reasons. But for members of Congress who are not resigning because they've been consumed with horrific personal scandal, what we are seeing Democrats now do all over the country, whenever they are home from work, whenever they are on recess like they were this past week, what we are seeing is that they are showing up, in many cases, unannounced at ICE prisons, at these so-called holding facilities and detention centers, these prisons and jails, effectively, where ICE is holding people without trial. We're seeing it all over the country. Democrats everywhere in the country are doing this thing. Here's Jim McGovern, for example, the Democrat of Massachusetts, negotiating with ICE to let him in the door of the ICE prison in Burlington, Massachusetts. They let him in alone. They wouldn't let him bring in any staff or a translator, but they let him in while tons of people protested outside that facility, and he came out and reported on the conditions that he found. Here's Democratic Congresswoman Angie Craig making an unannounced oversight visit to the ICE jail at the Whipple building in Minnesota. Here's Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz making an unannounced oversight visit to the Everglades tent prison camp in Florida, that so-called Alligator Alcatraz facility, and reporting back on the horrific conditions she says that she found there. She said it was absolutely disgusting. Here's Democratic Congressman Andre Carson in Indiana, having just gone inside one of the places ICE is holding people in that state, in Miami County, Indiana. There are about 100 protesters outside opposing that facility. His oversight visit there coming just after yet another person has died in custody at that site, at that one ICE facility in Indiana that they've had 2 people dead in less than 2 months. In Mesa, Arizona, there's a really dramatic story to tell you about what just happened to 3 Democratic members of Congress there, involving a strange ICE facility that they've sort of hidden inside an airport. One of those Arizona congresswomen is going to join us in just a minute to tell us what she and her colleagues found there and how they knew to go there when they did, which is a very dramatic story, and also how shaken they all were by what they found once they got in. Again, this is a very dramatic story out of Arizona. We've got that coming up with the congresswoman in just a moment. But while the President of the United States is in the state of mind that he is in, while he is posting pictures of himself online that portray himself as Jesus Christ, while at the same time he is attacking the Pope, while his actions have slowed the economy to such a crawl that in other countries, that same level of economic stagnation is cited as a reason that country just rose up and overthrew its authoritarian leadership. As Donald Trump is taking these increasingly wild and increasingly inexplicable military swings in the Middle East that really do make no sense, that appear to have no point, and that have left us with almost literally no allies in the entire world.
None.
As the president appears, bizarrely, to be trying, I guess, potentially to offload his vice president, because maybe that'll help. Amid all of this insanity, it may be a good time to remember that this kind of desperation from the White House and from the president is palpably driven by fear. By the expectation that voters, that the public, that the nation at large has turned against him and is doing so more and more every day.
Every day.
That the country is going to turf him and his party out on their ear and quickly. I mean, the whole idea of these guys, Orban and Trump and all of them, the whole idea of them is to create a false sense of permanence, that they can never be ousted, that they will never leave, that resistance is futile, that you better line up with them because you'll never beat them. They're going to be here forever. Well, how's that going? Streetlights or no? The streets of Budapest, the streets of Hungary last night were lit up to the stratosphere with pure joy. Lit up like a beacon with the proof that the people can fix problems like this. like Viktor Orban and like Donald Trump.
Your vote
and
matters.
that no would-be strongman can stop it anywhere, no matter what. Lots to get to tonight. Stay with us.
Your vote matters. Don't let nobody tell you it don't.
If you got a virus on your computer,
Don't
pretty
let
sure it's
nobody
my fault. I click on all sorts of Get
tell
rich
you
quick.
it don't. It absolutely does. Because if it didn't, they wouldn't be going through all these changes and stealing ballots and, changing laws so that they can manipulate still and stay in power. Nope, your time is up. You should have did better when you was in office. Bottom line. I'm finna get ready. I got a couple of more to show. I'm putting my magnesium on my feet. Putting my socks on. Let me show y'all. You know I like to show my T-sippers what I got going on. Ain't no shame in my game. I like for us to all know what helps us along the way. You know what I mean? I like us all to know the remedies that work. Where were you at, girl? This thing started moving on its own. Which one do I want? Why China vetoed?
Military force to reopen the street. So today I want to talk about...
Hold on. Hit the like button. That magnesium cream. Put on my feet at night. Put my socks on. Stimulate all the nerves and toxins. It relieves stress, hydrate, and it's deep relief. Get you some. Let's go.
Something that happened at the United Nations on April 7th that I think most people completely misunderstood. And I mean completely. Because when China and Russia vetoed the UN Security Council resolution on the Strait of Hormuz, the Western media said, okay, China and Russia sided with Iran. China and Russia are bad guys. China and Russia are shielding a regime that is threatening the global economy. But that is the wrong way to look at this. That is completely the wrong frame. Because here's my question, and I want you to sit with this question for a moment before I answer it. If China vetoed this resolution, and China is the world's largest buyer of Iranian oil, and China gets a huge portion of its energy through the Strait of Hormuz, then why would China veto a resolution that would reopen the strait? Why would the biggest victim of the Hormuz blockade be the one blocking the solution? Think about that. Veto a resolution that would reopen the strait. Why would the biggest victim of the Hormuz blockade be the one blocking the solution? China is the world's largest buyer of Iranian oil, and China gets a huge portion of its energy through the Strait of Hormuz. Then why would China veto a resolution that would reopen the strait? Why would the biggest victim of the Hormuz block this question for a moment before I answer it? If China vetoed this resolution, and China is the world's largest buyer of Iranian oil, and China gets a huge portion of its energy through the Strait of Hormuz, then why would China veto a resolution that would reopen the strait? Why would the biggest victim of the Hormuz blockade be the one blocking the solution? Think about that. Because once you understand the answer to that question, you understand not just the veto. You understand the entire war. You understand who is really winning. And you understand why China's veto was not a mistake. It was the single smartest strategic move of this entire conflict. Okay, so let me break this down carefully. Let's start from the beginning. On April 7th, 2026, the United Nations Security Council voted on a resolution that was originally proposed by Bahrain. The resolution would have authorized countries to use, and I'm quoting directly, all necessary means to ensure freedom of transit through the Strait of Hormuz. 11 countries voted yes. China and Russia vetoed it. Pakistan and Colombia abstained. Now I want to walk you through what actually happened in that room, because the details are very important. The original resolution was very aggressive. It would have given any country the legal cover to use military force to reopen the strait. Russia, China, and France all said, no, this is too extreme. We cannot authorize the use of force. So they revised it. They took out all references to offensive military action. And still China and Russia vetoed it. Then they revised it again. They took out any reference to Security Council authorization entirely. And still China and Russia vetoed it.
35 on average Christians are killed a day in Nigeria by Islamic extremist groups.
They've killed.
So they kept weakening the resolution. They kept making it softer. They kept taking out the aggressive language. And China and Russia still said no every single time. Now the American ambassador said China and Russia sided with a regime that seeks to intimidate the Gulf into submission. The UK ambassador said China and Russia chose to shield their ally, Iran. That is the Western narrative. China and Russia are protecting Iran. But I want you to really think about this. Is that what happened, or is something much more sophisticated going on? Okay, so here is my framework for understanding this. And this goes back to something I have discussed many times on this channel, which is the idea that in geopolitics, you should never look at what a country says. You should always look at what a country does. And more importantly, you should always ask, what does this action actually benefit? So let's apply this framework to China. China imports approximately 10 to 11 million barrels of oil per day. A significant portion of that comes from the Gulf region and passes through the Strait of Hormuz. So in theory, China should want the strait open. In theory, China is being hurt by the closure of the strait, right? Well, here's the thing. Yes, China is being hurt in the short term, but China is not making decisions based on the short term. China is making decisions based on the long term. And in the long term, this veto is one of the most strategically brilliant things China has done in a generation. Let me explain why. And I want to walk through this step by step because each step builds on the last. Step 1. Understand what the resolution would actually have done. The resolution, even in its watered-down final form, would have given the United States and its allies the legal legitimacy to use military force in or around the Strait of Hormuz. It would have been the United Nations saying, yes, America, you have the right to be here. You have the right to control this waterway. And here is what that means for China. If America successfully reopens the Strait of Hormuz by force, and Iran is defeated or forced to back down, then America has demonstrated something extremely important. It has demonstrated that it can still control the world's most critical energy choke point. It has shown that the American empire, even in decline, still has the muscle to decide who gets energy and who doesn't. And that means China goes back to being dependent on American goodwill for its energy supply. China goes back to a world where America can at any moment threaten to cut off Chinese oil supply by controlling the strait. This is called the Malacca dilemma in Chinese strategic thinking. China's fear that America can strangle its economy by controlling the sea lanes. Hormuz is the same problem. It is a choke point that America, if it controls it, can use against China. So step 1 is simple. If America wins this resolution and uses it to reopen the strait by force, America wins strategically and China loses, which means China has every reason to block the resolution. Step 2, understand what happens if the strait stays closed. Now here is where it gets really interesting. Because the closure of the strait is hurting China, yes, but it is also accelerating something that China has been working toward for decades, which is the de-dollarization of global trade, the weakening of the petrodollar system, and the rise of alternative trade routes that China controls. Let me explain the petrodollar system first because it is the key to understanding everything. Since 1973, all oil in the world has been traded in US dollars. This was a deal between America and Saudi Arabia. The Saudis sell oil only in dollars. America protects the Saudi regime because everyone in the world needs oil. Everyone in the world needs dollars. This creates permanent global demand for the US dollar. It is what allows America to print money, run enormous deficits, and finance its military empire. Without the petrodollar, America cannot afford afford to be America. Now, what happens when the Strait of Hormuz is closed? Gulf states cannot export oil. Petrodollars stop flowing. The Gulf states stop recycling dollars back into American stock markets and American AI data centers. The entire financial architecture of American power starts to crack. And China is watching this happen. And China is thinking, this is actually good for us. Because every week that the petrodollar system is under stress, the world is being pushed to find alternatives, and the alternatives that exist, the yuan-based oil trade, the Belt and Road payment systems, the Russian, Iranian, Chinese energy corridors, these all benefit China. So the closure of the strait in the medium term is accelerating the very thing China wants most, which is the end of dollar dominance in global trade. Step 3, understand China's alternative energy strategy. Now you might say, okay, but China is running out of oil because of the blockade. How is this actually good for China? And this is where you have to understand something important about how China thinks about supply chains. China has been preparing for exactly this kind of energy disruption for years. Let me give you some specific examples. China has been building strategic petroleum reserves. It has been diversifying its energy suppliers. It has been building the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which gives it access to ports in the Arabian Sea that bypass the Strait of Hormuz. It has been developing the North-South Transport Corridor with Russia and Iran, which gives it an overland energy route. And most importantly, China has been rapidly building domestic renewable energy capacity, solar, wind, nuclear, specifically to reduce its dependence on Gulf oil. So while the blockade is causing short-term pain for China, China is actually better positioned to absorb that pain than almost any other major economy, because China has been preparing for this scenario. The Americans have not. The Europeans have not. The Japanese and South Koreans, who are also extremely dependent on Gulf oil, have not. China took the short-term pain, but it is the country best equipped to absorb it. And every week the crisis continues, the alternatives that China has built become more important. And the American-controlled maritime system becomes less relevant. Step 4, understand the legal and moral dimension. Now I want to talk about something that most analysts completely ignore, and that is the legal and moral dimension of this veto. China's ambassador Fu Kong said at the Security Council, and I am paraphrasing, that the resolution failed to address the root causes of the conflict. Russia's ambassador said the resolution blamed Iran while completely ignoring what America and Israel did to start this war in the first place. And here is the thing, they are not wrong. Think about what actually happened. America and Israel launched military strikes on Iran, a sovereign nation. They bombed Iranian nuclear facilities. They killed Iranian leaders. And then, after starting this war, America went to the UN and said, Iran is threatening the strait. Please give us permission to use force against Iran. Think about the logic of that. You start a war. Then you go to the international community and say, please authorize us to use force against the country we attacked, because they are fighting back. This is exactly the kind of move that the rest of the world, the global south, Asia, Africa, Latin America, has been watching for decades. And the world is tired of it. When China vetoed this resolution, it was not just protecting Iran. It was saying something to every country in the world that has ever been on the receiving end of American power. We will not give America a legal stamp of approval for this. And the reaction globally was very different from the Western media narrative. Much of the world saw the veto not as China shielding Iran, but as China enforcing basic principles of international law. You don't get to attack a country and then get UN authorization to punish that country for defending itself. This is a narrative win for China of enormous proportions, because it positions China as the defender of the international rules-based order, the very thing America claims to defend. And it positions America as the country that breaks the rules and then asks for legal cover after. Step 5, understand what this tells us about the New World Order. Okay, now I want to zoom out because I want to put this veto in the context of something much bigger, which is the question of what kind of world we are moving into. I have argued on this channel many times that the world is moving from a unipolar system, where America is the dominant power and sets the rules, to a multipolar system, where multiple great powers all have meaningful influence, and no single country can impose its will on the others. The veto on April 7th was a very clear signal of where we are in that transition. Because what China and Russia essentially said is this: the United Nations Security Council is not America's rubber stamp. We have a veto. We will use it. And there are things that America wants to do, things America believes it has the right to do, that we will simply block. Now think about what this means strategically. For 30 years, since the end of the Cold War, America has operated with a degree of freedom that no other power in history has had. If America decided to invade a country, it could. If America decided to sanction a country, it could. If America decided to use the UN to authorize its actions, it usually could. Because Russia was weak and China was not yet powerful enough to consistently push back. That era is over, and the Hormuz veto is one of the clearest signals that it is over. Because now you have a situation where America goes to the UN to get authorization for something it considers a basic, obvious humanitarian necessity, keeping a major waterway open, and it cannot get it, not because of procedural tricks, but because two of the world's most powerful countries looked at what America was doing and said, no, we are not going to help you with this. This is a massive structural shift in how the world works. And most people are not paying attention to it because they are focused on the military dimension of this war. But the political and institutional dimension is just as important because the United Nations Security Council is the last remaining institution of global governance. And China just showed the world that it will use its power in that institution. Okay, now let me tie all of this together because I want to give you the complete picture of why this veto was the smartest move of the entire war. Let's do a thought experiment. Let's say you are the venture capitalist, okay? You have enormous resources and you are watching this war and you are asking yourself, who is actually winning? Most people look at the military dimension. They look at how many bombs were dropped, how many missiles were fired, which side destroyed more assets, and they try to figure out who is winning from that. But that is the wrong way to look at it, because as I have argued many times, war is fought across 4 dimensions: military, economic, political, and narrative. And if you look at all 4 dimensions, what you see is that China's veto was a move that advanced China's position in all 4 dimensions simultaneously. Militarily, China did not fire a single bullet. It did not spend a single dollar on weapons, but it blocked America from getting international legal cover for its military operations. That weakens America's military position politically without China taking any military risk. Economically, the veto kept the pressure on the petrodollar system. It kept oil prices high enough to hurt the American financial system and accelerate de-dollarization. And it did this while China's alternative energy infrastructure, its reserves, its overland routes, its renewable capacity, helps it absorb the pain better than its rivals. Politically, the veto positioned China as a defender of international law and national sovereignty. In a world where most countries are not part of the Western alliance, this is an enormously powerful message. The global South, which has suffered from decades of American military intervention, largely sees China as being on the right side here. And in the narrative dimension, China is now telling a story about itself that is very appealing to most of the world. We are not the aggressor. We are not the ones bombing sovereign nations. We are the ones defending the principle that you cannot attack a country and then ask the UN to authorize punishing that country for fighting back. So in all 4 dimensions, the veto was a win for China, and it cost China almost nothing. That is what smart strategy looks like. Now let me address one more thing, because I can already hear the counter-argument. And it goes like this: but China is hurting from the oil shortage. China cannot afford this strategy indefinitely. Eventually China will have to negotiate a reopening of the strait. And to that I say, yes, you are right. China cannot sustain an indefinite oil shortage. Nobody can. But here is what matters. Who runs out of time first? America is running out of interceptor missiles. America is running out of political will at home. Only 40% of Americans support this war. America is running out of financial patience. Every week of high oil prices puts more pressure on the American stock market, the American economy, the American political system. And America is running out of allies who are willing to take the economic pain with it. Iran is running out of nothing. Iran's economy is actually benefiting from the lifting of sanctions that this war has inadvertently caused. Iran is generating more revenue from oil sales than it has in years. Iran has been preparing for this war for 25 years. It is not running out of will or capacity. And China? China has its reserves. China has its alternative routes. China has its domestic energy production. China can hold out longer than America can sustain the political and economic cost of this war. So when you ask, who benefits from the passage of time, the answer is not America. The answer is China and Iran. And China's veto was designed precisely to extend time, to keep the pressure on, to let the economic and political costs accumulate on the American side. This is not Iran's war. This is not China's war. This is a war being fought in significant part over the question of who controls the global economic order. And China is fighting it in the smartest way possible, without firing a single weapon, without losing a single soldier, just by saying 2 letters at the United Nations. No, that is the power of a veto. That is the power of a great power that understands strategy. And that is why April 7th, 2026 may be looked back on as one of the most important days in the history of American decline. Okay, so that is my analysis for today. This is not prophecy. This is structural history combined with game theory. I want you to think about this carefully. Question it. Push back on it. The goal is never to tell you what to think. The goal is to give you a framework so you can think for yourself.
This isn't meant to scare you, but just this year, we've already seen brutal
hit the like button,
rolling blackouts, and water system failure.
I got one more and I'm going to sleep.
Russia made a statement last week that I have not been able to stop thinking about. It was quiet. It was careful. It was buried under the noise of the Islamabad talks and the blockade announcement and the oil prices and the markets crashing. Most people missed it completely. But I think it is one of the most important statements made by any government since this war began. And I want to explain why. Here's what Russia said. The Russian Foreign Ministry put out a statement saying that the Islamabad talks
Y'all ready to hit the like button? Are y'all ready to hit the like button?
Russia made a statement last week that I have not been able to stop thinking about. It was quiet. It was careful. It was buried under the noise of the Islamabad talks and the blockade announcement and the oil prices and the markets crashing. Most people missed it completely. But I think it is one of the most important statements made by any government since this war began. And I want to explain why. Here's what Russia said. The Russian Foreign Ministry put out a statement saying that the Islamabad talks represent an opportunity to advance a settlement, that most countries support the diplomatic process, that Russia hopes the talks succeed. And then at the end of the statement, almost as a footnote, Russia added this. Russia said it has concerns that forces may be attempting to slow or obstruct progress toward peace. That is the sentence I want to talk about today. Forces may be attempting to slow or obstruct progress toward peace. Russia named no country. Russia named no organization. Russia named no individual. Just forces, unnamed, unspecified, deliberately vague. And I want to ask the question that I think everyone should be asking. Why would Russia say something that specific and then name nobody? What is the strategic logic of warning the world that someone is sabotaging the peace deal while refusing to say who? Because here is what you need to understand about how Russia communicates diplomatically. Russia is not an imprecise actor. Russia's foreign ministry does not make careless statements. Every word in an official statement from the Russian foreign ministry is chosen deliberately. Every word is reviewed. Every word means exactly what it is supposed to mean. When Russia says something vague, the vagueness is the message. So let me walk you through what I think Russia was doing. And I want to use what I call the pointed silence principle. This is a concept I find very useful for understanding diplomatic communication. A pointed silence is when you deliberately leave something unsaid, not because you do not know the answer, but because saying it directly would cost you more than saying it indirectly. The silence points. the silence does work. The silence lets the audience fill in the blank themselves. Russia said forces are trying to obstruct the peace. Russia named nobody, but who in this situation has both the motive and the ability to obstruct the Islamabad talks? Let me go through the players and think about this carefully. America? No. America was at the table. America sent 300 people to Islamabad. Vance flew 21 hours. Witkoff was there. Kushner was there. Whatever you think of America's negotiating tactics, America's presence at the table means America was not the force trying to prevent the talks from happening. America was trying to use the talks to get what it wanted. Iran? No. Iran was also at the table. Iran sent 70 of its own people. Iran's foreign minister flew to Islamabad. Iran's parliament speaker led the delegation. Iran was engaging. Iran was negotiating. The talks broke down, but both sides were present. Pakistan? No. Pakistan organized the talks. Pakistan spent weeks preparing. Pakistan sent its prime minister, its foreign minister, its military chief, Asim Munir. Pakistan was the architect of the whole process. Pakistan had everything to gain from a successful deal and nothing to gain from obstruction. China? No. China publicly supported the talks. China's foreign minister made 26 phone calls. China helped broker the ceasefire that made the talks possible. China wanted the talks to work because a successful deal gives China leverage at the Beijing summit. Russia? Russia is the one saying this. Russia is pointing at someone. So who is left? Who in this equation has a structural interest in the Iran war continuing rather than ending? Who benefits from no deal? Who has been the most consistent opponent of any Iran negotiation that leads to relief for Tehran? The answer that the pointed silence is pointing at is Israel. And before I explain why, I want to be very clear about something. I am not making an accusation. I am following the logic of the statement Russia made. Russia created this silence deliberately. Russia aimed it at someone. I am tracing the aim. Let me give you the structural argument for why Israel benefits from the war continuing. Israel launched this war alongside America on February 28th with specific objectives. One of those objectives was to eliminate Iran's nuclear program permanently, not pause it, not restrict it, permanently destroy it. Israel's prime minister said this explicitly. Israel will continue to fight Iran's terror regime. The battle continues. The ceasefire does not include Lebanon. These are direct quotes from Netanyahu. So what happens if America and Iran reach a deal in Islamabad? What does that deal look like? The deal that was almost signed, the Islamabad MOU that Araghchi said they were inches away from, involved a ceasefire, a protocol to reopen Hormuz, discussions about sanctions relief, and the beginning of a process that could lead to a new nuclear agreement. A process, not the final outcome, a process. But a process that leads toward a nuclear agreement is a process that means Iran keeps some form of its nuclear capability, because that is what Iran has consistently demanded. Iran will not give up its right to enrich uranium entirely. Iran has said this over and over, and that outcome, Iran retaining any nuclear capability under any framework, is the outcome Israel has spent 30 years trying to prevent. That is the red line. Not Iran having a bomb, Iran having the capacity to eventually build one. Israel wants that capacity eliminated. A deal that leaves Iran's enrichment capability intact, even at low levels, even under inspection, is from Israel's perspective a failed outcome. So if the Islamabad talks succeed and produce a deal that preserves some Iranian nuclear capability in exchange for other concessions, what does that mean for Israel? It means Israel is now in a situation where its most powerful ally has made a deal that Israel considers a strategic defeat, where Iran is still standing, still enriching, still a power in the region, where the billions spent on bombs and the soldiers put at risk and the global criticism absorbed have produced not the elimination of the Iranian nuclear threat, but a managed coexistence with it. That is why Israel's prime minister kept saying throughout the talks, the battle is not over. That is why Israel kept striking Lebanon during the ceasefire, not as a military calculation, as a political one. Every strike on Lebanon during the ceasefire was a reminder to Iran that the ceasefire is conditional, that America's ally is still fighting, that any deal must address the full scope of Iran's regional activity, including Hezbollah. And here is the specific mechanism I want you to understand, because I think this is the part that nobody is explaining. The Islamabad talks broke down on two issues, the nuclear program and the Strait of Hormuz. Vance said it himself. The one thing that mattered was Iran's commitment not to seek nuclear weapons. But here is what the reporting from inside the talks reveals. The sticking point was not just whether Iran would give up nuclear weapons. It was whether Iran would give up its right to enrich uranium at all. America came in with a maximalist position on this. Complete elimination, not reduction, not inspection, elimination. Now, who crafted that position? Who decided that the American red line was total nuclear elimination rather than something more negotiable? That decision did not come from J.D. Vance. Vance is not a Middle East expert. That decision came from the people who prepared the American negotiating position and the people who most consistently push for maximum pressure on Iran's nuclear program, not in the foreign policy establishment generally, but specifically in this administration, are those closest to Israel. I am not saying this is a conspiracy. I am saying this is rational behavior by a state with clear strategic interests. If you want to ensure that no deal gets made that leaves Iran's nuclear program intact, you make the American demand on nuclear issues so maximalist that Iran cannot accept it. You set the bar so high that the talks are designed to fail on that specific issue. And what happened in Islamabad? The talks got to 2 or 3 remaining issues. Multiple reports say agreement was reached on most of the points. Agreement on most points. The sticking point was nuclear. And on nuclear, the American position was so absolute that Iran could not sign. Aragchi said it himself. They encountered maximalism, shifting goalposts. At the last moment, new demands appeared. Russia saw all of this. Russia was watching. Russia has intelligence sources inside Pakistan. Russia was monitoring the negotiations carefully because what happens with Iran directly affects Russia's own strategic position. Russia is Iran's military supplier. Russia is Iran's diplomatic cover at the UN. Russia has a direct interest in this outcome. And Russia concluded that something had pushed the American negotiating position into a place where it could not succeed. And Russia made a statement, and Russia named nobody. But before I go into that history, I want to ask a question that I think is equally important. What does Russia gain from making this statement at all? Because Russia is not a neutral party here. Russia is Iran's military supplier. Russia sold Iran the S-300 air defense systems. Russia supplied Iran with drone technology. Russia has been coordinating with Iran at the UN Security Council, vetoing resolutions that would have pressured Tehran. Russia and Iran are not allies in the formal treaty sense, but they are deeply aligned partners who share a common interest in limiting American power in the Middle East. So when Russia says someone is obstructing the peace, Russia is not speaking as an impartial observer. Russia is speaking as Iran's most powerful international partner. And Russia is sending a message not just to the world, but to the parties involved. The message to America is this: we are watching. We know what happened in those final hours in Islamabad. And we are attributing the failure to external interference rather than to genuine diplomatic incompatibility between America and Iran. The message to Iran is this: you are not alone. Whatever pressure is being applied on you to accept maximalist terms, we see it. We are publicly validating your characterization of what happened. Hold your position. The message to the unnamed target is this: we know what you did. We are not going to say it publicly in a way that creates a direct confrontation, but we are saying it indirectly in a way that everyone who is paying attention will understand. This is layered communication. It is doing multiple things simultaneously. That is the sophistication of the pointed silence. And understanding that Russia had specific reasons to make this statement, reasons connected to Russia's own strategic interests, does not make the statement less revealing. It makes it more revealing. Because Russia would only take the diplomatic risk of making this accusation, even vaguely, if Russia was confident enough in its information to stake its credibility on the implication. Russia does not make this kind of statement carelessly. Russia made it because Russia believes it is true. And
it's in the Epstein files.
The way it did.
That's where the blowjob, the bubble sucking, Donna sucking bubble come from.
Now I want to go deeper on something that I think connects to a much older pattern, because trying to obstruct the peace, Russia is not just describing what happened in Islamabad. Russia is describing a pattern that has repeated over and over in American-Iranian diplomacy for 30 years. Think about the history. In 2015, the Obama administration reached a nuclear deal with Iran, the JCPOA. Iran agreed to limit its enrichment to 367%. Iran agreed to reduce its stockpile of enriched uranium by 98%. International inspectors would verify compliance. In exchange, sanctions would be lifted and Iran would be reintegrated into the global economy. It was not a perfect deal. No deal is perfect, but it was a real deal signed by 7 parties, verified by international inspectors, and working. Iran was complying. In 2018, Trump withdrew from the deal. The official reason was that the deal was insufficient, that it did not address Iran's missile program, that it did not address Iran's regional activities, that the sunset clauses allowing Iran to resume enrichment after a certain period were unacceptable. Who had been pushing for American withdrawal from the deal since the day it was signed? Who celebrated loudest when Trump withdrew? Who had lobbied most aggressively against the deal? Netanyahu himself had gone to the United States Congress and given a speech directly against the deal while Obama was still president. That is an extraordinary thing. A foreign leader going to the legislature of an ally to argue against the sitting president's foreign policy. That is how important this issue was. And after Trump withdrew, Iran's enrichment went from 3.67% to 60%, from well below weapons grade to approaching it. The deal that prevented Iran from becoming a nuclear threshold state was abandoned, and Iran moved closer to the threshold. So the policy that was supposed to weaken Iran's nuclear program produced the exact opposite. Iran became more advanced, not less, after the deal was killed. Now in 2026, America and Iran are at the table again. After a war, after bombs, after a strait closed for 6 weeks, after the largest energy crisis since the 1970s, after thousands dead, they are at the table again. And the talks get to the final issues and break down on nuclear maximalism. Russia saw this pattern and made its statement. Forces may be attempting to slow or obstruct progress toward peace. Russia named nobody. But let me tell you one more thing that I think makes the Russia statement even more interesting. And this is the detail that I cannot stop thinking about. When the Islamabad talks were happening, when the Iranian and American delegations were inside the Serena Hotel in Islamabad, negotiating through the night, there were IRGC commanders who had flown into Pakistan specifically to advise Iran's delegation. Military commanders, not diplomats, generals. These IRGC generals were not at the negotiating table. They were behind the door, advising Iran's civilian negotiators, making sure that whatever Iran agreed to was militarily acceptable. Why does this matter? Because it tells you something about how Iran was approaching these talks. Iran did not send its civilian foreign minister alone to make a deal. Iran sent its military commanders in parallel to make sure no civilian negotiator could commit Iran to something the military found unacceptable. That is a negotiating structure that expects the other side to push hard on military issues. It is a defensive posture built for a maximalist opponent. Pakistan knew this. Pakistan's military chief Asim Munir was personally involved in the mediation. He had met the Iranian delegation the night before Vance landed. He understood the Iranian position. He understood where the red lines were. And Pakistan tried something extraordinary. Pakistan proposed that America and Iran jointly patrol the Strait of Hormuz. Together, American and Iranian ships in the same waters under a shared framework. Both countries responsible for keeping the strait open. Both countries invested in making it work. Both sides said no. America could not accept Iranian ships as legitimate partners in controlling a waterway America considers its responsibility. Iran could not accept American ships as legitimate presences in a waterway Iran considers its leverage. But the fact that Pakistan tried this proposal tells you how creative Pakistan was trying to be. Pakistan was not just hosting a meeting. Pakistan was engineering solutions. Pakistan was searching for any framework that both sides could accept. And you have to understand what Pakistan had at stake here to appreciate how hard Pakistan was trying. Pakistan imports most of its oil and gas from the Middle East. The Strait of Hormuz closure has been crushing Pakistan's economy. Pakistan has a mutual defense agreement with Saudi Arabia. Pakistan's military chief Asim Munir had called on Trump to extend the deadline for Iran to reopen the strait. Pakistan had been working this problem for weeks before the talks even started. And then there is the layer that most people missed entirely. Pakistan's Air Force flew F-16s and JF-17 fighter jets to escort the Iranian delegation's plane to Islamabad. Pakistan set up a protective aerial shield over the flight path. A NATO-compatible country, a country that hosts American military equipment, a country that Trump himself called a close partner and referred to Asim Munir as his favorite field marshal, that country sent its fighter jets into the sky to protect Iran's diplomats traveling to a peace talk. Think about what that image means. Pakistan is the bridge. Pakistan is literally willing to put its own military assets between America's war and Iran's safety to make diplomacy possible. That is how seriously Pakistan took the mediation role. And that is how much Pakistan needed the talks to succeed. But Pakistan's mediation, as impressive as it was, could only do so much. Pakistan could bring the parties to the table. Pakistan could create the atmosphere. Pakistan could propose creative solutions like the joint patrol. Pakistan could not control what happened inside the negotiating room when the final issues came up. And it almost worked. Araghchi said inches away. Multiple from this analysis, not who Russia was pointing at. Everyone can draw their own conclusion from the logic I have laid out. Safety to make diplomacy possible. That is how seriously Pakistan took the mediation role. And that is how much Pakistan needed the talks to succeed. But Pakistan's mediation, as impressive as it was, could only do so much. Pakistan could bring the parties to the table. Pakistan could create the atmosphere. Pakistan could propose creative solutions like the joint patrol. Pakistan could not control what happened inside the negotiating room when the final issues came up. And it almost worked. Araghchi said inches away. Multiple reports
Can I get y'all to hit the like button?
Agreement on most points.
I feel like my system is having problems.
That prevented the signature. Russia noticed what happened at the end. Russia made its statement, and then Russia named nobody. Now I want to close with something that I think is the most important question to carry forward from this analysis, not who Russia was pointing at. Everyone can draw their own conclusion from the logic I have laid out. The more important question is what happens now, because here is the situation as of today. The blockade has started. Iran has called it piracy. France and Britain have organized their own conference to reopen Hormuz without American leadership. Germany has slashed fuel taxes because its economy is being crushed. China
Hey,
is
Samantha.
reportedly preparing new air defense systems for Iran. The ceasefire that was supposed to last until April 22nd is under serious strain. Trump is heading to Beijing for a summit where China holds most of the leverage. And somewhere in all of this, Iran's foreign minister is flying to Berlin, Paris, and London. Not Washington, Europe. Iran is bypassing America and going to the countries that need Iranian oil, that are being crushed by the energy crisis, that have their own reasons to want a deal that Washington cannot deliver. If Iran makes progress with Europe before the next round of talks with America, the entire negotiating dynamic shifts. America loses its position as the indispensable party. Europe becomes the bridge. And America finds itself on the outside of a diplomatic process that it started.
Samantha.
Russia warned about this dynamic. Russia said forces are trying to obstruct the peace. Russia said it without naming names because the naming is not the point. The point is the warning itself. The point is that Russia is telling anyone paying attention that what killed the Islamabad talks was not a genuine disagreement between America and Iran on every issue. Agreement was reached on most issues. What killed the talks was a specific intervention that made the final issues unresolvable. That intervention may have come from inside the American negotiating team. It may have come from outside it. It may have come from a government with a structural interest in no deal. Russia is not saying. Russia is just pointing and letting the pointed silence do its work. Whether I am right about the target of that silence, I genuinely do not know. I am following the logic of the statement and the structure of the incentives. You should do the same. Push back on this analysis. Look at the evidence yourself, because the most important thing is not my conclusion. The most important thing is that you understand the pattern, because this pattern, talks that get close, a specific intervention that breaks them at the last moment, has repeated now across 3 decades of American-Iranian diplomacy. And each time the pattern repeats, Iran becomes more capable, not less. More enriched, not less. More entrenched, not less. Russia is watching this. Russia understands this pattern. And Russia made one quiet statement about forces trying to obstruct the peace. And Russia named nobody. But here's the final thing I want to leave you with, because I think the most important consequence of Russia's statement is not diplomatic. It is structural. When Russia makes this kind of accusation in this kind of language, Russia is not just commenting on what happened. Russia is inserting itself into the next round. Russia is signaling that it intends to be a more active player in whatever comes after Islamabad. Russia is telling Iran, China, and the rest of the world that America's negotiating position is being manipulated by outside forces. And Russia is laying the groundwork for a counter-coalition. What does that counter-coalition look like? It looks like what is already forming. Iran going to Europe, France and Britain organizing their own Hormuz conference without America leading it, China deepening its relationship with Iran, Pakistan continuing its mediation role, Russia providing the diplomatic framing that validates all of these moves as legitimate responses to American bad faith. This is not a conspiracy. This is states pursuing their rational interests in a situation where the dominant power has created a vacuum. America started a war it has not been able to finish cleanly. America came to talks with maximalist demands that the other side could not accept. America announced a blockade the same day the talks collapsed. And now America's allies in Europe are organizing alternative frameworks, and America's rivals are moving into the spaces America's rigidity has created. Russia's statement was a small thing, one paragraph in an official communication. But sometimes the smallest things reveal the largest patterns. And the pattern it reveals is this. The Islamabad talks did not fail because America and Iran are too far apart. They failed because Something specific intervened at the last moment to make them fail. Russia knows what that something was. Russia is not saying, but Russia is watching. And Russia will use what it knows at the moment it chooses to use it. That is the pointed silence, and it is still pointing. Think about that very carefully, and I will see you in the next one.
Okay, the very last one for tonight. Let's go.
Now let me talk to you for a minute.
But I need for you to get the likes.
Because something is happening in Washington right now.
I want for y'all to get the likes up. And I'll start as soon as y'all get the likes up. Double tap the face of your phone. Hit those 3 dots at the top right corner. Just tap the 3 dots. It'll take you to the like button. Hit the thumbs up. If you're on the phone, well, all of them got those. Hit the 3 dots. I'm waiting for the lights to keep going up. Because I'm getting situated to say night, night. Trying to keep y'all informed. To bring y'all the truth versus the lies. And y'all still want to handle me any kind of way. Okay. I go to sleep, I just go to sleep. I think some of y'all like listening to the lies. That's what I think.
Now let me talk to you for a minute. Because something is happening in Washington right now that I think deserves more of your attention than it's getting. It's April 13th, 2026. Congress returns tomorrow from a 2-week Easter recess. And the Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, the man who is second in line to the presidency, spent his Saturday not working the phones, not brokering deals, not trying to solve any of the 5 or 6 crises sitting on his desk. No, he flew down to an airplane hangar in Bridgewater, Virginia, to headline a rally against a redistricting referendum. He stood in front of hundreds of people and called the governor of Virginia, Abigail Spanberger, a former CIA officer and a moderate by any honest measure, a Marxist. He called the redistricting plan totally scandalous, unlawful, unconstitutional, Democrat gerrymandering. Now look, I've been in politics a long time. I've been called a lot of things. Some of them were even true. But when a Speaker of the House chooses to spend his time throwing red meat at a rally instead of doing the actual work of governing, that tells you something important. It tells you the job has gotten away from him. Because here's what's waiting for Mike Johnson when that gavel comes down tomorrow. A war in Iran that Congress never authorized, with 13 American service members dead. A Department of Homeland Security shutdown that is now in its 59th day, the longest in American history. Surveillance powers under FISA Section 702 expiring in exactly 1 week. And a potential avalanche of expulsion votes that could shift the balance of power in a chamber where he can barely hold a majority. And we'll come back to every one of those things because the details matter more than the headline. But the question I want you to hold in your mind as we walk through this together is a simple one. When a Speaker of the House cannot lead unless the President saves him, what does that tell us about the state of American self-governance? Let's start at the foundation. Let me tell you something about governing with a thin majority, because I've lived it. When I was president, after the 1994 midterms, I woke up every morning with Newt Gingrich running the House and Bob Dole running the Senate. I had to learn a different kind of politics overnight. The politics of persuasion, of finding common ground, of making your opponents feel like they got something, even when you knew the deal was better for your side. That's how you govern when the numbers aren't in your favor. Mike Johnson is facing something I'd argue is even harder. As of right now, the House stands at 217 Republicans, 214 Democrats, 1 independent, and 3 vacancies. Tomorrow, Clay Fuller, the Republican who won the special election to replace Marjorie Taylor Greene in Georgia, gets sworn in. That brings the count to 218 Republicans. Sounds better, right? But there are still 2 vacancies. So on paper, Johnson's working majority is 2 votes. 2. On a party line bill, he can afford to lose exactly 1 Republican.
Thank you.
1 person having a bad day. 1 member with a grudge. 1 principled objection. And the whole thing collapses. Now here's what's revealing. Back in January 2025, when the new Congress organized, Johnson pushed through a rules change that requires 9 Republicans, not just 1, to trigger a motion to vacate the chair. He raised the threshold to protect himself. And I remember thinking at the time, you don't build a higher fence around your house because the neighborhood is safe. You build it because you know the wolves are circling. And that's the structural reality behind everything we're about to discuss. Every fight, every vote, every crisis is filtered through this razor-thin margin. It doesn't demand ideology. It demands skill. It demands coalition building. And it demands the one thing Mike Johnson has shown the least interest in: compromise. We've got to walk through what's actually on the table this week, because when you lay it all out, side by side, the picture becomes very clear. First, and this is the military operations against Iran since February 28th. 13 American service members have been killed. Mike Johnson has shown the least interest in compromise. We've got to walk through what's actually on the table this week, because when you lay it all out, side by side, the picture becomes very clear. First, and this is the most constitutionally significant one, the Iran War Powers Resolution. The United States has been conducting military operations against Iran since February 28th. 13 American service members have been killed. More than 380 have been wounded. Congress never authorized this war. A previous War Powers Resolution failed on March 5th, 212 to 219. Close, but not enough. Since then, as the conflict has ground on, supporters say they've picked up Republican defections. On April 9th, during a pro forma session, Johnson blocked a fourth attempt to bring it up. Now, Democrats plan to force a vote through a privileged motion when the House reconvenes. This is the big one, and we'll come back to what it means for the Constitution in a moment. Second, the DHS shutdown. We are now on day 59 of a partial government shutdown affecting the Department of Homeland Security. The Senate passed the funding bill on April 2nd. Johnson has refused to bring it to a vote. TSA agents have missed paychecks. Hundreds have quit. ICE agents, untrained in security screening, were sent to airports to fill the gap. This is not governance. This is a system breaking down in real time. Third, FISA Section 702 expires on April 20th. That's 1 week from today. Johnson and the president want a clean extension, but conservatives in his own caucus are rebelling, and Democrats have little reason to help him. If it lapses, critical surveillance authorities go dark. Fourth, the Virginia redistricting rally I just told you about. And fifth, there are now as many as 4 House members facing possible expulsion votes from both parties. Any one of those could shift the margin. This isn't a busy week. This is the speaker drowning. I've had the privilege of watching some remarkable speakers up close. Tip O'Neill. Now, there was a man who understood that the House belongs to its members, not to its leader. Tom Foley, a gentleman who could broker a deal in a whisper. Newt Gingrich, who I disagreed with on just about everything, but who understood that being Speaker meant you had to actually move legislation. Even in the middle of our battles, the government shutdown of '95, impeachment, Gingrich kept the trains running. He put bills on the floor. He took votes. He won some, he lost some, and he lived to fight the next day. Now, here's what's different about Mike Johnson. His approach to leadership is not to build coalitions. It's not to negotiate. It is fundamentally to prevent votes from happening. He blocked the Iran War Powers Resolution on April 9th during a pro forma session. He literally used a procedural maneuver to make sure the House couldn't speak on the most important question a legislature can face, whether American troops should be at war. He won't bring the Senate's DHS bill to the floor because he knows it might pass with Democratic help. He flew to Virginia to campaign against a redistricting referendum instead of working the phones to find a path forward on FISA. Let me tell you something. In a democracy, you don't lead by keeping people from voting. That's the opposite of leadership. A real speaker, even one with a paper-thin majority, finds a way. You call members into your office. You listen. You horse trade. You take the tough vote and accept the consequences. What you do not do is hide the ball, block the vote, and hope the president tweets something nice about you. And this is where things start to get really serious. Because it's not just about one man's job. It's about what happens to the institution when the leader won't let it function. Now I want to talk about the damage that doesn't make the headlines. Because the most dangerous consequences of what's happening right now are the ones you won't feel until it's too late. Let's start with war powers. The Constitution is unambiguous. Article 1, Section 8 gives Congress the power to declare war. That's not a suggestion, that's the foundation. The founders put it there because they understood something essential. No single person should have the authority to send young men and women to die without the deliberate consent of the people's representatives. When a Speaker of the House actively blocks a war powers vote, he isn't protecting the president. He is voluntarily surrendering the most solemn power Congress possesses. And let me be very clear, this sets a precedent. The next president, Democrat or Republican, will point to this moment and say, Congress didn't object last time. Why should I ask permission now? Then there's the shutdown. 59 days. TSA agents working without pay. Hundreds quitting. FEMA's non-disaster operations suspended. Cybersecurity professionals furloughed. This isn't an abstraction. These are real people, your neighbors, protecting airports, responding to emergencies, defending our networks from foreign attack. When they lose faith in the system that's supposed to pay them, we all pay the price. But here's the most dangerous part of all, and I want you to hear this clearly. When a speaker's survival depends entirely on one person, the president, the separation of powers collapses. The House of Representatives becomes a satellite office of the White House. And that's not how our system was designed. We have three co-equal branches for a reason. When one of them surrenders its independence, the whole architecture weakens. And once that precedent is set, getting it back is a whole lot harder than losing it. Now let me zero in on that Virginia rally, because it tells you everything you need to know about the strategy and the cynicism at work here. On Saturday, Mike Johnson stood in that airplane hangar and called the redistricting plan totally scandalous, unlawful, unconstitutional Democrat gerrymandering. Strong words. And you know what? If gerrymandering is wrong, and I believe it is, no matter who does it, then those words should apply everywhere, to every party. But here's the honest truth. Mike Johnson has fully enabled and championed Donald Trump's unprecedented mid-decade gerrymandering scheme in states like Texas, Florida, and Missouri. Efforts specifically designed to redraw maps outside the normal census cycle, to rig the 2026 midterms before a single ballot is cast. The DCCC called it out plainly. There is nothing more shamelessly hypocritical than MAGA Mike Johnson begging for cash to subvert the will of Virginia voters when he has fully enabled Trump's gerrymandering scheme in other states. Now, I'm a Democrat, and I'll be honest with you. Both parties have drawn maps they shouldn't be proud of over the years. I know that. But the asymmetry here is staggering. You cannot fly to Virginia and call a governor a Marxist for supporting a redistricting referendum when you have spent months helping the president redraw maps in 3 other states to lock in Republican seats. That's not principle. That's strategy dressed up as outrage. And what does it tell you about Johnson's real priorities? He's not governing for the country. He's managing a campaign operation from the Speaker's chair. The Virginia referendum on April 21st is going to be a bellwether, a test of whether voters accept being told to shut up and live with maps drawn in back rooms. I think the American people are smarter than that. I always have been. So where does this go? Let me walk you through 3 scenarios, because I think it's important to be honest about what's possible and what each path costs. Scenario 1, Johnson survives by surrendering. He keeps blocking votes. He delays the Iran War Powers Resolution again. He refuses to bring the Senate's DHS bill to the floor. He threads the needle on FISA with some last-minute deal. He relies on Trump's endorsement and the 9-member threshold on the motion to vacate to keep his job. In this scenario, the Speaker survives, but Congress decays. Public anger builds through the summer. The midterms become a referendum not just on policy, but on whether the House of Representatives can function at all. This is the most likely outcome, and it's the one that should worry you most, because it normalizes paralysis. Scenario 2, the dam breaks. The privilege motion on Iran succeeds. Enough Republicans defect. Johnson loses control of the floor. A motion to vacate follows. We enter another Speaker crisis, potentially worse than the McCarthy saga in 2023, because the margin is even thinner and the stakes are higher. A war is underway. The government is partially shut down. Surveillance authorities are lapsing. Choosing a new speaker in the middle of all that would be, to put it mildly, extraordinarily dangerous. Scenario 3, and I'll admit this is the least likely, but I have to put it on the table because it's the only one that serves the country. Johnson surprises everyone. He allows votes. He cuts a deal with Democrats on DHS funding. He brings FISA to the floor. He lets the War Powers Resolution get an honest vote. I work with Newt Gingrich on welfare reform and balanced budgets. We prove that divided government can function when leaders choose to lead. It's possible. It's always possible. But it requires something Johnson hasn't shown so far: the courage to govern independently. Let me close with this. I don't agree with Mike Johnson on virtually any policy issue. He knows that, I know that, you know that. But this isn't about policy. This is about whether the Speaker of the House of Representatives, second in the line of presidential succession, the leader of the body closest to the people, can function as the independent head of a co-equal branch of government. Because if the answer is no, if the Speaker governs only at the pleasure of the President, only to avoid a revolt from his own caucus, only to survive another week, then something fundamental has broken in our system. Now, I've lived through a lot of hard chapters in this country's story. I've watched us make terrible mistakes and then slowly, painfully correct them. That's the genius of America. Not that we always get it right, but that we've built a system that lets us fix it when we get it wrong. Self-government has always been messy. It was messy when I was governor. It was messy when I was president. It'll be messy long after all of us are gone. But self-correction doesn't happen by itself. It requires citizens who pay attention. It requires voters who show up, not just in November, but in April, like that Virginia referendum on the 21st. It requires all of us to hold our leaders to a standard higher than partisan survival. The founders didn't give us a perfect system. They gave us a system that works if we work it. So I'll leave you with this. The system doesn't fix itself. We fix it. That's always been the deal. And right now, today, that deal needs every one of us to hold up our end. Thank you for listening.
Okay, good night.